here, so thank you for coming out on Saturday. Last week I was at the Los Angeles Lake meeting, and the presentation that Bonnie is going to give was given there. And there was some good questions, but I know that this group's going to have some good questions too. And we've seen the presentation before. Processes and procedures is a big deal, so hopefully you've all read, what is it, 300 pages you said? Wow. but there's some real high points that I think are important for everyone. We also today we're going to talk about writing those comment letters that we all work so hard at submitting in with our recommendations to the planning department, but we didn't really formally get together on that, so I want to just put it out to you to save it for our next month's meeting, where if you could bring examples. I really want to help to educate neighborhood council land use committees in the submission of comment letters with regards to the projects that you may agendize and review and have your boards vote on. I think sharing of that information, sharing of the depth and the detail or not, maybe the short version, I think that would be an excellent education tool that we could use and spend some time at these meetings. So if you can think about that and bring examples or bring outlines, bring how you structure it, bring how you, however you do it.
Bring questions.
Yes, then we can collaborate or talk together on that. So think about that. We probably will have more people arrive in the next few minutes, and so we'll do introductions again in a while. But at this time, I'd like to call on Bonnie to present the update regarding the Processes and Procedures Ordinance and everything we want to know about it, right? So thank you again, Bonnie, for being here today.
Is that clear for everyone? Does it need to be sharper, bigger? All right, so as Cindy had mentioned, we are here to give an update on the Processes and Procedures Ordinance. So hopefully it's not news to you, because we did release, we released it for the first time last year and had 4 public hearings in fall of last year. But based on some feedback, we went back and revised the ordinance and are coming out again with it, and we will be having a second round of public hearing. We have hearing notices and the Q&A sheet available at the front table. So the hearing will be on June 26th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Deaton Auditorium downtown. And then I would, just for the sake of, I guess, time management, ask that if you have questions during the presentation to hold them until the presentation is over, and then we can address those. Okay, so well, you're a pretty informed crowd, so you're probably already aware of Recode LA, which is a initiative to comprehensively revise the city's zoning code. This ordinance would be the second major deliverable for the project. The first was the R1 variation zones. And then future deliverables include zoning options for the Boyle Heights and downtown community plans. So some of the technical background: the current zoning code is Chapter 1 of the Municipal Code, and our ordinance would establish a new chapter called Chapter 1A that has all the administrative provisions for the Recode LA and zoning code. So these administrative provisions would apply to both the existing Chapter 1 and the new Chapter 1A. So for a while, as community plans get updated, because there are 35 of them and not all of them will be updated at the same time, some parts of the city will have the new Recode zoning options, some parts of the city will have the existing Chapter 1 zoning code. So for a time, there will be 2 sort of sets of regulations in relation to zoning. So as the community plans get updated, parts of the city will start to receive the new zoning options. Regardless of whether as the community plan has been updated or not, these are administrative provisions that would apply to both. So there's no difference in the processes that would affect zoning, that would affect applications. So a key goal of Recode and of this ordinance is to make processes easier to use and understand. To give you a sense of what the situation is like now, we have over 100 different processes with similar but slightly different workflows. They're scattered throughout the code, so there's not one section where you can find all the information you need to know about. Well, I will say this presentation is available online at recode.la. So if you have any troubles reading or, you can access it online. I can also email the link to Cindy, and she can disseminate it to you all. Basically, it's just the current situation is not user-friendly. What we're proposing is more consolidation and standardization with consistent headings and a centralized location of information. So this would mean for the first time that all the processes in the zoning code are located in the same section instead of scattered throughout.
And it's this plug that is defective.
Maybe it's the plug going in here, because when you touch that, it goes.
Do you need tape? Let's see if that works.
Okay. Well, so there's.
Nobody did anything.
Well, you put your hand on the table.
Okay. Maybe that's it.
Well, okay. So this is one of the sort of key slides. The rest I can just go through, but there's a lot of technical changes that will be happening as part of the consolidation process. But some of the key ones that we want to make sure that the neighborhood councils are aware of are the revisions to the noticing requirements. So today, noticing requirements by mail can range from 10 to 24 days, and we are proposing to standardize it to 21 days for everything. So there's no guessing about whether it's 10 or 24 or 15. It would always be 21. The notification radius, there's sort of 3 tiers today: adjacent and abutting 100 feet and 500 feet, and we'd like to change it to adjacent and abutting 300 feet and 500 feet. And then the appeal period, it can range from 10 to 15 days today, and we want to standardize it to 15 days for everything. So you would know that you always have 15 days to appeal. Okay. And then, so this next part, well, I'll try our best. It's basically a summary of the key parts of each section of the ordinance. So there's over 300 pages, and we've tried to distill down the key points into these several slides. The first part is the authority section, which basically lists all the decision makers and what decisions they can act on. Procedural elements, these are the general provisions that apply to all processes. So things that, examples such as how do you calculate the time period, what happens after an appeal is filed, what happens if the initial decision maker fails to act. This one I do want to spend a little time on just because when we presented at Link and at Hank last week, there were some questions about this. So legislative actions are generally actions that are taken by the city council, and things like a general plan amendment, a zone change, a specific plan amendment. We're generally trying to maintain those as they are. One addition to those provisions would be this ability to notice or to if the notice involves more than 1,000 property owners, you could publish in a newspaper of general circulation instead, and it must be a display advertisement of at least 1/8 of a page if you are going to publish. And this is a provision that is taken from the state government code. So this is something that the state allows cities to do. We are adding it as an option.
It's really too bad this plug doesn't work.
Well, let's see if I can.
Oh, it's back.
Oh, it's back. Okay. I'll just. try to time it, I guess, when the screen is visible. So then quasi-judicial review. So we've just renamed a few things. ZAD and conditional use permit has been renamed Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3 conditional use permit. So a ZAD is now a Class 1 conditional use permit, and then a Class 2 conditional use permit is a ZA CUP, and then a Class 3 is a CPC CUP, so City Planning Commission CUP. And then site plan review has been renamed project review. Ministerial, so these are things like an administrative clearance. We're just maintaining the existing administrative review process. Specific plans, we are not touching anything to do with specific plan processes. They are continuing to stay the way they are. We are just moving over the provisions into our new formatting and system. So relief, these are the category of entitlements that deal with an applicant asking for relief from some portion of the zoning code. Also, I mean, I generally, I forgot to mention, but just to clarify, our process and procedures ordinance only affects entitlement procedures. So it has nothing to do with by right processes. It only has to do with entitlement processes that come to the city planning department.
I'll save the
Okay,
question.
sure. So the adjustment process, the decision maker has been changed from the zoning administrator to the director. It was formerly, so that's one change. Alternative compliance, this is a new process that would allow applicants to request relief from a specific development or performance standard if they can show that it complies with an alternative standard or condition that's consistent with the intent of the regulations. So the point of this is to allow for example, applicants who may have architects that can come up with an innovative design that meets the intent of the regulations but not the exact specifications. So if they come up with a better way to meet the pedestrian friendliness of the design, then this is something that they could ask for. Then modification of entitlement. So this is something that's sort of based on the plan approval process today that would allow for entitlements that have been approved to come in and ask for a modification to that entitlement, but they would be limited to no more than a 20% increase or reduction of the physical development, planned operation, or conditions of approval. And whoever acted on the original entitlement, so if it went to the City Planning Commission originally, they would have to go back to the City Planning Commission to get the modification.
Can you slow down a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
We should raise it.
So non-compliance, this is another section that's really just renaming. So the revocation of conditional use or quasi-judicial approval has been renamed evaluation of non-compliance. So that's how we check if somebody is not complying with the conditions of approval. And then administrative nuisance abatement has been renamed nuisance abatement and revocation. That's the process for when you revoke a land use, that if somebody has proven that they're not complying with the zoning regulations. Okay, so miscellaneous is the zoning administrator interpretation process. That's something that the zoning administrator has the authority to do today. They can interpret whenever there's an unclear regulation, and that's something that we're maintaining into the new system. Subdivision review, similarly to the specific plan processes, we're not trying to change anything to do with the subdivision processes. We're just moving over the information into our new format. The same goes for the historic preservation processes. So all HPOZ processes will be remaining the same. They'll just be located, the information will just be located in a new section of the zoning code. And also for coastal development, we're keeping those as they are, just moving the information over. Building and safety. So building and safety appeals, the one change is that traditionally, or today, the zoning administrator is a decision maker, but they've been delegated the authority from the director. So we are formalizing that the decision maker is the zoning administrator. And then it's just located, it'll be located in a new section of the zoning code, those provisions. FECO provisions, so this is a new section that hopefully will be very helpful to you. This would codify, today the zoning code doesn't have any provisions about how to file a CEQA appeal. So we are adding information so that it's clear what the steps are, what the processes are in order to, for filing a CEQA appeal. And then we have a definition section for the administration article. So to give you a sense of the timeline of the ordinance, we released it at the beginning of this month, and then we'll be having a public hearing on June 26th downtown. July 6th is the last day to submit comments to me for consideration in the staff report. You can continue to submit comments after that date, but you would have to address those comments to the City Planning Commission. We'll be working on revisions based on the feedback that we receive, and then we are tentatively scheduled to go to the City Planning Commission on August 9th. So as I mentioned earlier, there are hearing notices and a Q&A sheet with these dates available at the front tables. And Cindy also has the links to the documents online. So just one last note about public comment. You may be familiar with this already, but through the Recode LA project website, we have an online document-based feedback system where you can submit your comments directly onto the draft ordinance itself. So if that's an option that interests you, you can do so by going to recode.la. They'll be available, this document will be available to comment on directly through July 6th, which coincides with the same deadline for submitting comments to me any other way. So that's it for the presentation portion, and I'm ready to take questions. Yes.
Okay. One,
Would you like me to go back to any slide or just?
no, I'm fine,
Okay.
thanks.
Actually,
When
can I
is
say,
this-
I'm sorry,
Okay.
could I just say, Bonnie, could you just, one more thing I just wanted to touch on, which is very short. How much, since this was released last year,
Yes.
could you just give the group an idea of how much has significantly changed since then?
Right.
Is the release, do they need to reread the whole thing if they read it, or do they need to look at just some section?
Right.
Is there a red line?
So really the changes from now till then have been, or from then till now have been technical changes where we've gone back and reviewed the provisions and realized we missed, a sentence here, or we missed a process there. So the only new section is the building and safety section, but really it's just moving over all the information from today's section 1226. So we had, so that's sort of like new text to the document, but not necessarily a new process. Let's see. Otherwise, it's the key points. For example, the slide that told you the changes to the noticing, that's stayed the same. And it's really been a lot of name changes. After we workshopped a few of the name changes in the original draft, people thought they were confusing. For example, we had called things a conditional permit instead of conditional use permit. So we've changed it back. It's been in the line of those types of changes. For your review, instead of trying to read the ordinance like a book from front to back, we'd really suggest that if there's an entitlement process that you care a lot about or you know a lot about and you want to see what our draft says, we'd suggest that you look at it like that. So for example, if you're really interested in zoning administrator determinations, we would suggest you go look at those class 1 CUPs and then sort of pick and choose or, based on your interest. Yes.
Okay, this sounds great and all well and good for anybody that's been on Mars for the last 10 years. But it has no relation to what we're really seeing happening in the neighborhoods. As an example, You talk about building and safety. In our neighborhood, building and safety has jurisdiction over less than half of our parcels. The other half and the bulk is HCID. HCID is very proud of the fact that they will not enforce anything that relates to aesthetics, the front yard, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you do about that? Okay, building and safety again is only a portion. We run into problems with building and safety on their disagreeing with the plain language of an ordinance. A good example is city prohibits paving in a front yard, with a couple of exceptions related to circular driveways. But building and safety won't enforce, and they say, oh, it's okay. And we say, how do we appeal? And they say, well, and how much does it cost? They say, well, we don't know, because the appeal is two-part. One is you file your appeal, and we really won't tell you what our objection is, and we study the matter, and then we decide what the issues are. Then you have another fee, and we don't know what those fees are, but plan on $1,000 for the first phase of the report. Okay, so what do you do about that? Oh, my glasses. Okay, adjacent. Say there's 5 lots adjacent. Okay, one of them lives in New York City, the owner. So that's gone. The next one, the guy receiving the mail doesn't understand anything but an obscure Chinese dialect. So that does you no good. The next one's a serial scofflaw who is bringing down the neighborhood anyway. He's got his car parked in the front yard. He has a 12-foot front yard fence. He stores a bunch of stuff in his front yard. He paved over his front yard long ago. So that one doesn't do you any good. And so on and so forth. And one of the things you could do as a suggestion is if, like in our neighborhood, there's an established neighborhood association, is you could give them a notice. How much trouble would that be? And then we get these word before some idiot at the city approves it. Then, anyway, the biggest problem we have is enforcement. HCID and building and safety. What are you going to do about that? I mean, if they tell you they're just not going to enforce, even if the fence is 7 feet tall and the code is very clear for the last 80 years that 3'6" is the limit. So, it just doesn't make any sense.
Okay,
You're not
okay.
really dealing with what we on the front line have to deal with every day at the city.
Right. Okay. So just to, I guess, summarize what I think I heard from you was, one is enforcement from other agencies and the noticing by mail. So with the enforcement piece, we really have no, and I'm sorry that it really comes down to, we have no power over those other agencies. Our ordinance is focused on the city planning department processes and entitlements, and that doesn't catch a lot of projects. So there are a lot of projects that go forward, that go straight to a building permit application stage and bypass our department completely. So in those cases, there's really nothing that we can do as part of this ordinance. But as far as the noticing goes, so the neighborhood councils, the certified neighborhood councils, are currently receiving hard copies of applications when they are filed with the Department of City Planning. So you're actually, if you're part of a certified neighborhood council, you should be receiving copies of the applications that have been filed in your area, in a timely fashion as soon as they're filed. So that would catch even the applications that don't necessarily require a public hearing. So that's the way it is today. And that the only, I guess, note that I would say is we have heard that sometimes, the mail gets lost or gets sent to the wrong neighborhood council, and all we know is that whatever is on file with the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, whatever address or information is on file with them, that's where all those early notifications get sent to. So if for some reason your neighborhood council is not receiving those, we would suggest checking in with Dunn to see if maybe they have outdated information on file.
Ed's idea about if there are registered, recognized organizations in a community in addition to the neighborhood councils, there should be a way for us to register them with planning so that those HOAs or community civic associations can get notices, because the neighborhood councils don't necessarily get out the information to the community.
Agreed.
They're that awesome.
Excuse me, a couple questions about your,
Yeah, that one.
oh, I'm sorry, did I, skip somebody? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, according to what I heard, I might be wrong, it said that administering the code is only going to be to the two community plans?
Oh,
currently? Okay, is that?
No, so those two community plans are the ones that will receive the new zoning options, the
Right.
recode zoning options.
Okay, well, isn't that the same thing as not?
No, because and I probably didn't say it clearly enough, regardless of whether they have the new zoning options or the existing zoning options, the administrative provisions, which include all these processes, will apply to both.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter if your community plan has been updated now or will not get updated for the next 2 or 3 years. You would still be regulated in the same manner as
But
the rest of the city.
The code would not be enforced.
No, I don't understand what you mean by it would not be enforced.
Okay, well, okay, you keep saying that they would be required for the administering processes, but the code is separate from the way it processes itself. So are they subject to the code, just like everybody else?
Yes, so every parcel in the city, regardless of whether the community plan has been updated or not, is regulated by the zoning code. These processes are part of the zoning code, so they would apply and have to be enforced by our department and building and safety where appropriate. So there should be no concern about one part of the city being regulated one way and the other another.
Okay, number 2, hearing notices.
Mhm.
They need to be more than 21 days. They need to go out to a community. There's no way that a community can be notified of a hearing and gather support within 21 days. And it needs to have a wider radius, and you need to notify the neighborhood, the councils of these, which are not happening, okay? They need to know about it, and it needs to be more than 21 days. The neighborhood councils meet once a month.
Yes.
There's no way for us to advise our members or the people within the communities
Right.
to be advised of what is going on in the city. This is extremely important. This is why the people are so upset. 2, what are alternative standards? There is something called a ministerial process. And you mentioned alternative standards. What are they, and who is going to decide them?
Mhm.
And that they're not going to be allowed to do a modification over for 20%. Does this apply to Mr. Hadid? Number 3. 4, we need more time for the neighborhood councils to comment. And the people within the communities. These are people that work. Your sole function is this. But unfortunately, we all, we work. So we need to have a little bit of time in order to comment on these things. And appeals. They're much too expensive. There isn't any funding here in order to do that. Possibly the neighborhood councils could get a budget for appeals. Sorry, I'm just saying, okay.
Okay, so let me see if I
that's all that in a
can.
nutshell.
Right, okay, so.
And, oh, wait a minute,
Uh-huh.
that's one more thing. We're extremely frustrated with the process. There's no ability for the councils or the stakeholders or the neighborhoods to have time in order to comment. This is all great, okay? But if there's no enforcement, there is no appeals, there is no time to comment, none of this is going to matter to us, because it's just gonna be a whirlwind and it's just gonna happen without our ability to comment.
Okay, so the first point was the notification radius and the notice by mail, right?
Or the first was more than 21 days.
Right,
Yeah,
so
that's it.
21 days is what we came up with based on our best assessment of what might fairly fit,
For
you
you
know.
it does, for
Well-
us it doesn't.
Right, so in regards to that and the notification radius, if you have suggestions for what you think would be better, we would like to hear that.
Well, what
it's
you-
the best that we could come up with, but we are willing to consider, from your perspective, what would be a better
Okay.
time and radius. And
So
then,
so the radiuses, the radii, I guess, are different today based upon your entitlement. So some when you ask for a
conditional use?
fence height adjustment, right, maybe, you might, for something like that, that's relatively small, the radius might only be the adjacent owner. For a,
Zone change?
for a conditional use permit that's for alcohol sales, say, that might be a 500-foot radius.
Okay, no, it doesn't work that way.
No?
Okay, a neighborhood's involved, okay, in both of those.
Okay, well, I'm just
Okay,
telling you
fence
how,
height,
I'm just telling you how it
unless
is
the neighbor, right.
today.
No, I understand, and
So I'm
this
just
is why
saying-
it needs to change.
Okay, well,
Because
I'm
it-
telling you what it is today and what we're trying to move towards so that at least people understand that we're not gonna notify the whole city when somebody wants a fence height adjustment.
You don't have
Likewise,
to
we're not gonna
neighborhood.
just notify, what's that?
But why not notify the established neighborhood association?
Okay,
Then
well,
they
we
can
can
get,
change a lot of things.
we
I
can
think
get the
what
word
one
out
of the points of this is that we're
instantly.
at least organizing our system, so at least we'll be able to pinpoint what you want to change. Right now, there are over 100 processes scattered through our code. It's very difficult for us to pinpoint this, and this, and this. Here, we are at least consolidating everything. We're not changing much.
I
We're
know, that's
changing.
the problem.
But
You know-
that is the,
We need to
well,
change.
do you know
okay, well,
how,
we can't change
don't
everything
kill the
and then
messenger.
juggle it.
do you know
Don't
how,
kill the
you know
messenger.
how far behind the city records are on owners?
Is that part of this
They're-
project, Ed?
Yeah,
How is
because
that part of this
you
project?
send those letters to the
Okay, well,
adjacent
we don't
owner,
maintain
and
that
he
database.
moved 10 years ago.
Okay, so
That's
these
the
are
problem.
these are
That's a
good
problem.
comments to put in for the whole.
This one.
Right.
I don't think we're gonna get to the woman, that woman had some some cogent questions and,
Yeah.
but
So,
there, we're trying to not change too many things. We're trying to make this at least a consistent system so that you could say, oh, that's really dumb. They only notify
Right.
the adjacent owners when they're changing the world,
Right.
or I don't care about a fence height adjustment 4 miles away. We want at least, you'll now know where the problems are, is right now, there's no way you can figure it out.
Yeah.
4 miles away.
Okay.
I'm just saying, I'm being, whatever that word is.
So for those specific questions, I mean, if you have suggestions for, what you would consider as an alternative, as a satisfactory alternative, we'd like to hear it, and we can include that in the staff report as, a comment that we received and considered. And see, what the decision makers think about that. You had a question about the alternative compliance. So the alternative compliance is a new process that is meant to allow some flexibility for people who come up with a better who come up with a better idea for meeting a standard. So I can say that this is unlikely to be used very often currently or in the near future, because in order to be eligible for this entitlement, the zoning code has to specifically say that you can use this alternative compliance process to ask for an alternative to this standard, and there are not any real standards today that allow that. So it's really setting it up for the future when we have higher level of design regulations. An example of what that could look like in the future would be, for example, if we have a frontage requirement that says you need to have 80% of your building facade has to be transparent. It has to have glass. It has to be for the purpose of making it a pedestrian-friendly facade. So the intent of that regulation is to make the building face pedestrian-friendly. But, so for example, a lot of times grocery stores or movie theaters, they can't, for their business, they can't have 80% window front. Grocery stores need that blank wall space to put their refrigerated shelving, and movie theaters they might put up like movie posters and display boxes instead. So those are types of alternatives to the design standard of 80% transparency that would allow for those types of applicants to meet the intent of the regulations of creating a pedestrian-friendly facade without having to sort of mess up their own building in order to comply with a very specific design regulation. So that's the way we envision that process working.
Because otherwise today you'd have to file for a variance for everything. When you want to deviate from our code for anything, whether you want to go blow out the height or change your bicycle rack, it's a variance. So we'd like to call out a few things that if you meet the intent of your transparency, or if you meet the intent of storing 10 bicycles, show us what it is and we'll sign off or not sign off on it, as opposed to you filing a variance, which are essentially very difficult to approve because you've got to make hardship findings about why your property is different from your next property. But we'd like to make sure that the movie theater can open up without going through a year-long process.
Is there any transparency in that process?
You mean like public notice?
No, of us, our
Either
councils.
to the council office or the neighborhood council or
I'm not sure where you...
community?
Well, you would continue to receive the notice of the filing of an application for
So this
an
would
alternative
be-
compliance.
But is there
Would be
any place
required.
for input at all?
There's no, I don't think for an alternative compliance there is a public hearing involved, yeah.
Definitely.
So,
But there is an appeal process, so if you feel, if that type of specific comment, if you feel this process that's being proposed doesn't have a public hearing required, and it should, like, that's the type of comment we
There
would.
isn't even a place for.
So I want to,
But it's only, but again, as Bonnie said, it would only be called out. So we're not going to call out height or setbacks as being eligible. There's only going to be things that are guideline-y that are going to be eligible for this. Because it's really time-consuming for us to approve variances for bike racks.
Right.
so let's be sure that everybody gets a chance to ask their questions. So who wants to ask a question of Bonnie? Raise your hands and I'm going to start. Okay, so Sarah, and we're going to go back here, and then we're going to come up here and this way. And then I have a question too. So Sarah first.
Thank you, Cindy. I would like to say something very simple in support of what Sharon Cummings was saying here about the time that was being allowed to the neighborhood councils. I think that 21 days is quite insufficient because sometimes that falls within the space between a meeting and your deadline,
Right.
which means nothing. So I would suggest that we have a better timeline there to maybe 30 days.
Well,
Because we need to have time
there's
to
difference
review.
between notification
Okay.
and hearing notice,
Thank
so
you.
you should make that
Right.
Clear.
That is a good point.
Well, when we talk about notification, it means the notification of the public hearing. And then the notification, the early notification that neighborhood councils get is separate from the zoning code. That's part of the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment.
Make it clear that
That's-
a hearing notice is different from early
Yes.
notification, and neighborhood councils have more than 21 days
Right.
to evaluate.
You're gonna, right, well, so did everybody hear what August was saying, is that?
That's what my question.
Okay, so there's,
was.
so when an application is filed with the planning department, we send out a blast to the neighborhood councils.
Right.
We don't know when the hearing is gonna be, it could be a community plan update, it could be a fence site, so we don't know. So everybody knows the application is then filed, there's a number. So you know, and that's not what Bonnie's really talking about. What Bonnie's talking about is once it gets to the decision maker and they schedule, the hearing will be on July 6th, we have a notification that we send out to persons of interest. And that list varies based upon the entitlement, and it also varies based upon the,
The location.
And the scope of the item.
it varies based upon the entitlement, like whether or not it's a small fence site or a zone change. And it can also, the time we give can also deviate based upon it. So what Bonnie's trying to say is that right now we have we have various time periods and various radii. So it's all kind of jumbled. So we give people sometimes only 10 days of notification for, sorry to pick on the fence sites. So you only get 10 days. Some people get 24 days. So that's really what we have right now. We've got the little ones get 10 days, the big ones get 24 days. Some get somewhere in the middle. We're trying to say they're all 21 days. So at least you know, once a hearing's scheduled, you get the notice, you know it's 21 days. If it should change, let's talk about it. We're trying not to change too much, but right now, nobody gets more than 24.
There's a notice of application and a notice of hearing.
Right, so the application's in, read it, look at it. You may have a year to look at it, you may not, but you're not gonna have to worry about the hearing. The hearing is not yet scheduled. Hopefully, it's not anywhere. It's probably sitting on somebody's desk.
Okay.
So,
Is
I'm
gonna try to make this clear because I'm so confused.
It's a lot.
And I'm hearing a lot of other people, and I'm gonna try to make what I'm trying to say. Thanks, Tom and Tom. Okay. So, we're having a lot of CEQA lawsuits and a lot of appeals. And when RECODE came out, it was to make everything more clear. But now we have, whoever is going to interpret the intent of a regulation, which now takes us to an adjustment, an alternative compliance. Compliance is compliance, like the rules are the rules, which is why you're getting all these appeals and all these lawsuits, because there's been an adjustment, a modification to an entitlement. There should be nothing that's unclear. I did attempt to read through all the pages. I don't see what the intent of that regulation is.
You talking about the modification or the alternative compliance?
On all of them. If you're saying that you can ask for an adjustment or an alternative compliance, I mean, that's something coming out of air. That's like
That's
so
new.
wishy-washy.
That's totally new.
And a modification of an entitlement, if we say what the entitlement is, here's your example, density bonus, SB 1818. We've got projects that are coming in and it says, to be a by right to qualify for this big density bonus, you must be in or within 1,500 feet of a major transit stop. Well, now we're getting 2,400 feet, 2,900 feet because it's off menu. You can ask for a helipad on top of your building because it's not there, but that's not what you're doing with this. RECODE was supposed to be making this clear. The residents, the businesses, developers, everybody had a clear intent. We all knew what it said within the community plan and within the school code. But now, there should be no unclear regulation. So,
Okay.
this is so confusing to everybody. Where is the list, like the base list? Because with density bonus, it doesn't matter. They just go off menu.
Right.
And then it's passed, and then we sue. And then there's another appeal, and then the city's answer to this is to raise the fees to file an appeal or the state to take over city planning.
Right, okay. So the three entitlements that you listed, the alternative compliance, the adjustment, and the modification of entitlement, they're not meant to be used for unclear regulations. I'll try to, I'm just trying to give you the background. So the only entitlement or the only process that relates to, there's an unclear regulation is the zoning administrator interpretation. So then when we get to the adjustment, the alternative compliance, and the modification of entitlement, the adjustment is something that we have today that basically has very specific limitations on what you can ask it for. So you would never, it would not have to do with an increase in density. You could never use that to get an increase in density. You can never use it to get an increase in FAR. It's for things like a
Side yard.
Yeah, side yard setback. The alternative compliance is for, it's really meant to work in a setting in which we have really specific and a higher level of design standard. So today, like Ed was mentioning, there's a lot of parts of the city that don't have a design standards. So we are trying to.
Does that include D and T and Q conditions?
What do the design standards include?
Condition or a,
Q
because those are sort
condition.
of like their own kind of specific plan.
Right.
thing.
They're like conditions of approval on a zone change. So you could not change those with using any of these processes. If you wanted to make any change to a Q or a D or a T, you would have to go through the entire zone change process, which goes all the way to the city council.
Those are in your zone. Those are kind of locked into. So if you got Q, C2, that is your zone. So you can't.
We have some projects that are skipping over the Ds and the Ts.
And how are they? Well, we could talk later about specific things. I don't know how they're getting them.
So where
Well,
do we see, like, why would the intent of a regulation be not able to be clear? That it would require.
Well, when Bonnie was saying earlier, I'm sorry to cut you off, but she said there are some things that we will call out in the code. We have none now. Nothing can take advantage of this, but since we are becoming very design-oriented, things like transparency might be a regulation in the code that says every building on a corner must have 80% window transparency, which is a
Architecture.
something, whatever. I'm just picking one of
them.
It's
So that could be
design
something. Or a
standard.
bike rack has to be U-shaped and provide bike storage for 25 bicycles, and it must look like this on the wall. So those are regulations, they're guidelines, but hey, I can hang bikes from the ceiling 3 in a row and I meet it because I only have 15 square feet. Or I'm a movie theater and I don't want windows and nobody wants windows. We just want to have window boxes. I'm meeting the intent of the 80% transparency, or I'm meeting the intent of storing 25 bicycles, but I can't do this weird thing you want. I want to do something else. They'll come into a planner and the planner can say, okay, the intent is made, but only on the things that we called out. I know this sounds a little controversial, but we're trying to have our planners focus on the things that are important and not on the things that are not important.
So you will have a specific.
Yes,
List, yeah.
for these, this is the big deal. This is not a big deal, but this is a big change to our code. That's the only one, though. Everything else is in the code today. Everything.
Right. So that list has not been finalized yet. So there's still time. As neighborhood council members, as community members, as stakeholders, to when those are then released to the public and say, here, these are the things that you can use an alternative compliance for. That's when you have your chance to comment on that. I don't think that should be allowed, or this regulation is very specific, and I think you should allow alternative compliance from it. This ordinance doesn't have that list of regulations that you would be able to use it for. It's just setting it up in the code so that it can be used in the future if the threshold
And you'll definitely be let know when that happens. If we once we pick the one item that can do it, we will come here and let everybody know that the bike racks are optional for alternative compliance. But if you want to put in bicycle racks for just 10 as opposed to the 25, that probably won't be something you can get an alternative compliance for. That would probably be something you'd have to file a variance for.
Because when you're doing a ZA interpretation or even a director's interpretation, start to get like political and things involved there. And you've got all these folks with all these neighborhoods and they're saying, wait a minute, we made an investment in this community also. Whether it's our commercial strips, whether it's anything. And now all the rules, the rug has been pulled out and they can go and build anything they want because they're asking for an entitlement or an off-menu something, we were always taught that a variance was like if you needed an ADA compliant 4 feet extra on the roof to accommodate like an elevator shaft.
Right, that is what it's for.
300 extra units and, 400,000 more square feet of retail with zero. We're having an issue with the zero property line, with the cars, the ingress and egress, you're right on the sidewalk. It's so dangerous, and we're having real problems with that. Everybody's coming in now on the side streets, which is the residential part, and the cars are like hitting the dogs and the strollers and the children who only have 5 feet of sidewalk.
Well,
They're
I
not
mean,
set
I don't
up.
want to get into a philosophical conversation, but our code is consistently being undermined by Sacramento. I mean, that's just a
Visions
fact.
right now
Yes.
is
We
zero.
are just constantly not
You're absolutely
keeping up.
correct.
Right.
to your MC or what I was saying. So we can't not do what Sacramento. So we can't change what Sacramento is telling us to do.
It's meaning what you say, because you've got millions of people that are depending on you, and everyone that comes here. It's just, the more everything changes that you can have, I'm sorry, but alternative compliance. Like
Okay.
compliance is
Well-
compliance, you have compliance.
Well, it's, we could take that out. But the point of it is not just to allow it, but is to not have our planners waste their time on stuff that really doesn't matter. And we'll make sure that that list, which does not exist yet, are for things, we're not going to put in height can go to infinity, alternative compliance. That's not going to happen probably, I don't think, in our lifetime, but if it does, you'll find out about it and you'll be able to comment. It'll be like the little things that we get variance applications for that require a full environmental clearance, public hearing, notification to maybe 500 feet or a lot of people, and they're like, what? I don't care. Let's talk about the things that are bugging you so you don't have the anxiety.
Okay. Who's next? And then we're gonna come to Studio City here.
Two questions. One of you got the other night at Hang was the notification rate limits or whatever it was. You were gonna go to 2,000 surrounding residents or. Okay.
Right, well, I know the comment you're talking about, and we're considering it, so it would be, or we've received that comment and we're considering it. There has
Okay.
not been a change made.
I wanted this group to be able to hear that too, because we did come up with some alternatives or additions that you could, include, which were, the ideas were.
Well, can I just clarify what you're talking about? Because I think people might not know what you're talking about.
Yes.
So we gave a presentation. One of the provisions of this code, which is a change, one of the changes that Bonnie listed is that if the project or the entitlement requires notification to more than 1,000 property owners, that we can just put a notice in the newspaper instead of mailing out to 1,000 or more than 1,000.
And our question was, not that many people get the newspaper.
Right.
The other thing was, wasn't it an and/or situation? And
It was,
should-
yeah,
It should
it's-
always be an and.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it's written right now.
May substitute. Well, I mean, that's
Yeah,
why
it's
we put it in.
yeah, it's.
May.
Take that out.
But, I mean, we could do that, or we could not do it, but the thing is, sometimes we do updates to the Wilshire Community Plan, which requires, hundreds of thousands of dollars to send out to every occupant, resident, tenant, blah, 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 blah. And then we get 90% of them back, and,
Yeah, that was.
It's a lot of
that was-
money.
That was understandable.
but we
It
want to
was-
hear alternative ways of doing
Is
it.
there some way to create like a
Isn't
widget that goes on each neighborhood councils for like these bigger things? So like each neighborhood council could have a watchdog that's like kind of watching these things, even check in daily, or people, the HOAs? I mean, we have technology.
Right.
you know?
Well, you're notified of everything that comes into the
Yeah,
department.
but it sounds like they want to like, let
Well, and right, and we, that's one of the key points that have come up is, we have, people use electronic communication more and, digitally and web posting, but unfortunately for the realities are that in order to meet the legal requirements, it has to be either mail or publishing or posting on site. So, we can do all that sort of digital notification on as a supplement to the legal requirements, but we can't do digital notification
And
in
you were looking
lieu
at
of.
the DWP bill, maybe?
Yeah. So we
Yeah,
got a
that
few
would be
comments
good.
about, alternatives to
neighbors.
publication.
Yeah.
So I mean, those those are being considered.
Thank you. My second question, which would be a lot easier, is the modification of entitlement you talked about. What I didn't hear was who makes the decision. It says, it's an option, but if you get that option, who makes the decision?
Right. So
Because-
whoever makes the decision on the original entitlement that was approved makes a decision on the modification. So if it was a city planning commission decision, so for example, it was the city planning commission decision on a CUP, then in order to make any modification to the conditions of approval, so for example, it could be a change in the operating hours. So like it's a Starbucks and they said they were going to operate from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and now they want to open at 5 a.m. So that would be a modification, and they would have to go back to the city planning commission to get that modification approved.
Thank you.
So there's a lot of interesting discussion here. And I've got all sorts of things floating around in my head, but I'm just going to kind of pick on that alternative compliance and kind of an observation about the whole process, which is that the work that you're doing is creating a fixed document, restructuring our existing zoning code, and is a document that needs to evolve into the future in terms of anticipating that there will be conditions which you can't see at the present time, which is common in law and municipal codes and all sorts of regulations. The other trick with the zoning code is that it has to be applicable to all sorts of different properties and different conditions that you can't envision the language necessary to accomplish a goal for every single property that has adjacencies. Everything is specific. So there has to be room for interpretation. There has to be a balance between what is fixed and defined and what you can interpret for specific conditions. And I think that this structure is doing that pretty well. It also seems more modular so that you can fit new pieces in if you need to. And the alternative compliance, I mean, to me, for every 9 times that a design standard fits and works in achieving a goal, there will be one time where if you follow those standards, you're going to get a design solution that is inappropriate and just wrong. So I think that alternative compliance, if it's properly administered, is a necessary component of an evolving code that is a good addition.
It works in other cities.
It's already modeled it
from other cities. We don't have it today. We think it sounded good. We could take it out. It's not. It's something we could certainly just remove from this ordinance
Or
today and never have it.
Or workshop until,
I mean, I think it's good. We have nothing that can take advantage of it now, or even in our new zones that are coming up.
Other cities follow their plans and their community plans, I think, a lot more than what we've seen in Los Angeles lately. And we put so much time into a community plan that's real planning to say this tapers down here, and this is a regional center, and this is general commercial, and this is industrial. But then we don't follow it, and everything becomes with the entitlements and the alternatives and the exceptions becomes this spot zoning. So
Well, we don't update our community plans in a timely fashion, so we are constantly either do it project by project, or we're bringing them to mind by Sacramento.
Our project is trying to also work towards the same goal of making sure that it doesn't become dependent on entitlements. That really is,
everyone should have a clear understanding of what to expect.
Right.
But like in Hollywood, we become a free-for-all. We have a regional center, we've got hillsides, we've got, limitation on development, and it's just all being thrown out. I mean, like I said, we've got projects right now. They go, oh, that doesn't matter. That's just the FAR. There's no height here.
So I'm going to ask some questions, then I'm going to go to Sharon and Esther, and then Barbara. Okay. So I got a few in there, but there's maybe little things. The format for the hearing on June 26th, will it be like this, or will it be like a ZA hearing? What will be the format?
It will be a very similar, if not, very similar presentation to this, and then Q&A, so that probably would take up the first 30 minutes, and then we would go into the public hearing portion of it.
Okay. And could you go to the authorities page? And in the meantime, I'm going to ask a couple of what I think are quick questions. For anybody who has an application in process now, if, once this gets passed, will those current applications, or the ones that are in process, have to then adhere to these new, like the hearing notice, let's say the hearing notice goes to 21 days, will that become the 21 days, even though the application was filed, last year sometime? And
usually once you've paid your fees, your plan check fee, you're vested to the regulations that applied at the time you paid your fee. So if they applied but haven't gone to that stage, then yes, they would have to comply with the new regulations. If they did pay the fee and are already, went through that stage, then they could continue complying with the old regulations.
And then you said something a few times about the intent of pedestrian friendly, and maybe it's been asked and I apologize, but I'm trying to understand who and how the intent of pedestrian friendly is determined, and how the community can have a part in that.
And are you talking about what Bonnie said about alternative compliance for the transparency to make it walkable with the windows?
Well, that was, I came up with that, yeah.
It's not going to be more, it's going to be a very black and white type of decision, not a philosophical one. If you meet the 80% transparency by putting in window boxes for your movie theater, if you put in 75% movie boxes as opposed to 80%, well, then that's going to be a problem. But if you're going to meet the intent of whatever.
That brings me to the next question, which I think is related, that has to do with building and safety. Is there an effort on in any way with working, because you said building and safety was the big change. Is there some way, because I think that's where there's a big problem. We have uses that are from way back 40 years ago, and then the community doesn't get the upgrades that all of these millions of dollars worth of plans and so forth have given us. So we don't get the windows, we don't get the signage, we don't get the landscaping, we don't get the pedestrian friendly, because they're going, or the sidewalk improvements, because they're using back a use from way back.
And it's
I
never
don't know.
closed?
So they never get to the stage of the application, it never gets here. So I guess my question is, how is building and safety getting an update on this?
Well, they're
so
getting updated, they're coming along with us for the ride, so we update them regularly, so they're part of it, but nothing is going to happen like that. Everything's going to have to be rezoned. So remember, this is step one. Step two is actually doing it. So this is the easy part. We actually have to put it on the ground. Well, these processes and procedures are not zones. They are just how to get permissions.
Yeah.
But the actual new zones are going to go on the ground. Now they're going to go on the ground hopefully in downtown very soon, and in Boyle Heights, and in the Southwest Valley. But we got to do the other.
Because what I always tell in the community is nothing happens unless somebody goes down and pulls a permit. And if somebody doesn't, most of the time they don't do that.
If it's a pre-existing if it's an old building that was around since 1901, and it's now in a neighborhood that's got a transparency requirement, well, they don't have to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't make them knock their wall down and put in a window.
No, I know that, but anyway, it's probably more complicated than that. They do make those changes, and they just don't go to the city and get approved.
You probably won't see a higher level of design standards until the community plan has been updated for that area.
Okay. All right. I think it was Sharon and then Esther. Okay.
Couple fast things. First, Tom and Bonnie, to you, believe me, we are all over the state. We would like to rein in Sacramento's abuses and get them out of your local planning, because they are screwing up the good things you're trying to do for us. 827 was just the immediate poster child, but there's more coming, and we know that.
There is more coming, that's for sure.
And so, we're working on it. We're years behind, but we're working on it. Secondly, on the modification of entitlement, 20% figure, I almost feel like that's sort of a get out of jail free card. I'm thinking maybe the 20% might be too high. I'm thinking maybe it should be between maybe 10%. Because what I'm thinking is, someone comes in and then their initial application, they get a bunch of 20% modifications, and then they know they can go for that.
But they have to come in
And they'll
again
do it.
for it.
And we've seen that over and over again. People learn how to game the system fairly quickly, and I'd hate to have recode undermined when we have so much good stuff with our design and the frontages and the use packages, undermined by the modification or the alternative compliance.
Right. So are you saying they come in once for the 20% and then they come in again and get another 20% on top
Yeah,
of that?
exactly.
Oh, yes.
But why wouldn't they just come in for 40% at the beginning? So what are they,
No,
what
that's
are they
their way
gaining?
of-
You have a limit of 20.
But they didn't get the entitlement to begin. I'm sorry.
Tom, one of the things we immediately noticed about 827 was that it allowed double dipping between local ordinances and state ordinances. So it wasn't clear that you couldn't do that.
State law says this, so we don't have to
So maybe,
comply with you.
maybe there has to be language that says.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you
Right,
could
yes.
put some
So if
language
you
in
look
about
in
double
the
dipping
modification
or
of
restricting.
entitlement section where we list the restrictions, I shortened it for the purpose of the presentation, but there we say no more than 20% cumulatively or separate. So they can't stack those 20%.
I would modify your slide to put cumulatively in there, because that was one of the things I was looking for, and I thought, that's really weird. I don't think we discussed that in ZAP.
Uh-huh.
But, it's a concern.
Right, yeah, but we are on the same page in that we don't want people to do that, so we are writing it in a way so that
Perfect.
it's clear that they're not allowed
Perfect.
to.
Hear that, people?
Do that.
They're not going for the cumulative piecemealing stuff.
It's
They're
all
gonna
in the
restrict it.
text, right? And so as clear and definitive that you are, that there's just not like I said, a variance used to be, they just need 4 feet. Now it's turned into like something monstrosity. And that is not what the intent of a variance was. So when you say.
But also, we don't really, the planning department, we have not been approving many variances over the last several years now. If you're talking about density bonus, that's not a variance, that's completely out of our hands.
Because now we have density
Right.
bonus, and then we have all these other changes like this. and
So our
that.
variances are completely under control, as well as I know. I don't work in the projects as much, but we don't get, and this is the neighborhood councils here, we're not getting a lot of variances for egregious changes to our regulations. They've trickled.
LA
We
is
used to
the
get a lot.
largest planning department in the entire country, right? Kudos to all of you. However, we also have a high level of appeals and lawsuits and everything. If that's not telling you and demonstrating right there that something is out of whack with these giveaways, these entitlements, the changes, the spot zoning, the everything, that there is not clear, what to expect. Your constituents, your residents, the people who live here, the taxpaying citizens, they also have a right to make that investment, a right to understand, have an understanding, and not have something completely pulled out because somebody else says, oh, well, it's not that area. It's not the regional center area, or, oh, now we want to change this. So someone else comes in and goes, great, we'll do that 6 blocks away. And you get away with it. That's not planning. We just want to let the
Well,
planning guy.
it's not planning. Our planning should happen when we do our community plans.
Yes, and then hold to it.
Yes.
Correct, but our community plans haven't been updated in 20 years.
40.
How long have we been working on Hollywood?
Too long.
Too long. Why do we keep working on Hollywood?
We have a webinar on Hollywood.
All right, why is it that we keep working on Hollywood for so long? Because we keep getting sued.
Right.
They have the Tom, they could have changed that information, it was all right there, it was.
Okay, I'm not gonna get into the debate about it, but we're constantly litigated, we can't plan by ourselves, so the state thinks we're inept, and they plan for us.
Dead end zone with
Okay, our next one is Esther, then Barbara.
Okay, I had 2 questions. One of you answered about the time frame, but we have, and I'm using this only as an example. 18-unit contractor came to apply for, he applied for 18 units. The community said no because there just wasn't enough space for children to be in that area. Now, can he come back under modification and ask for something different as for a setback or?
If his application was denied, then he can't come for a modification. He has to
But what
file
is he
a
applying
rent.
for? 18 units could be a by right project, it could be allowed by our zoning code, and they don't need to come to the planning department at all. If they're building 18 units of apartments on a appropriately zoned lot, they don't have to come to the plan, we can't say no to that. Just like we can't say no to somebody building a single-family house on an R1 zone lot, we can't say no to somebody building 49 units on an R4 zone lot. But I'm not sure what you're talking about. If they're building condos, or if they ask for a variance, or if they ask for
Single
something.
families, as an 18 unit for single families, and then on these 2 blocks, that's what they've asked for.
Right, so that could be a by right project. You're not giving us enough, if they, did they have to come to the planning department?
I thought they did.
But they might not have been required to, because Ed can attest, they can go in by right and go to building department. Here are my plans to build 18 units on this lot. They check the zoning, they check the plans, okay, go. There's no appeals, there's no public hearing, there's no notification, there's nothing.
Isn't there a subdivision or something?
Not if it's apartments. If it's a
It's
condos,
well, they said single family home, 2 stories.
well, I don't,
Maybe
if
it's
it's a
Sounds like
rental.
a small lot.
If it's small lot, yeah, I mean, they would.
If it's if they have to chop the lot up, they do have to come to the planning department.
But basically, they couldn't ask for modification unless their initial application had been approved. So if it was denied, they would have to file a brand new one with completely different plans in order to get, to be.
Okay, because they stopped, they haven't even started now. Originally, they set the lot up to start, and then when we had the meeting, they said we weren't in agreement with that. So that's why I was asking, can they come back now? Okay, without refiling?
They cannot.
Okay.
Okay, Barbara's next, and then we're gonna.
My question is regarding early notification to neighborhood councils. Do we presently get notifications of director adjustments, alternative compliance, and modifications, entitlements?
So alternative compliance and modification are not currently in the zoning system. So there's nothing that's applying for them right now. So you wouldn't be receiving those.
But
You would
we
be
do-
receiving those now, but you would be getting them, or you should be getting them for adjustment applications currently.
And that would be the director adjustments.
Yes, now, yeah, or it used to be the zoning administrator is doing it, now will be the director doing it. So, but the process is the same. So in the future, if our ordinance is adopted, you should be receiving
You should be getting early notification of anything that comes to the planning department. That's just this, anything that has a case number, whether it starts with the CPC or a ZA or whatever, a variance, a fence site, a community plan update, anything.
Even a DIR. DIR.
DIR?
Yeah.
Yes, as soon as it gets I don't actually, Dylan and Fabiola will probably be better at that, but I think so, right, the
Yeah,
DIR?
DIRs, we get DIR. Okay, all right.
Okay, the notification radius of 500 feet is ridiculous. It needs to be at least 1,000 feet, and especially if the river is between the project and the homeowners. The river,
She's saying that the 500 feet notification radius is inadequate. Is that right?
seriously inadequate. It needs to go to at least 1,000 feet.
For
And-
everything.
Or
For anything that
Anything, let me put it this way, if it's on a major street and it's backed by residential, you need to go to 1,000 feet. Don't worry about it. If the river is there, the 1,000 feet, the river should not be included in the 1,000 feet. It's 1,000 feet, it's a project, river, 1,000 feet. The sound carries right across the river, like it isn't there.
So even if it's a fence height adjustment or
I'm talking about a major project on a major road.
something specific.
So
Yes.
anything that's
Anything
500
on, like,
feet right now,
Ventura
you would like
Boulevard
to see.
and Studio City, the river behind it, you need to go to 1,000 feet. The other thing is, we had a recent project on Ventura Boulevard, and we were told that they notified to 500 feet, but not many people in that area got it. And I spoke to a woman today who doesn't live within that 500 feet, but you've got the boulevard, the river, a street, and then she's here. She clearly gets all the noise from this project, but she's not within the 500 feet. It's just not enough. The other thing is,
and just again, remember, not everything gets notification. If it doesn't come to the planning department,
I know.
and you're allowed to do
I
it,
know.
you're allowed to do it.
but
Nobody
where
gets
it's under
notified.
you,
Yes.
give us more notice. The other thing is 21 days is nowhere near enough for, like, we get the notice, we might not have a meeting for another 15 days or so, and then we can't get it out to the community.
Your neighborhood council should have already made its decision before the hearing notice comes out.
You would think, you would think.
So,
You have 6 months.
in the noticing thing, has there been any, or is there a process or conversation about signage? I notice in smaller communities, they'll put up the large signs and they have all the different contact people in there up for several months.
Yes, so anytime a project or a property, an application for any change to a physical property is filed for, there will be a requirement that you have to post on the site at least 10 days before the public
No,
hearing.
I'm talking about a big, huge sign poster. I see these in the small, like in Glendale and Pasadena and all that, wherever there's some big apartment going in. And that way, everybody can visually see, oh, this is coming up here. Here's who you contact. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how can the city of LA, if they aren't already, be more smaller city so that more people would find out?
We do have a posting requirement, but our
It's this big.
our standards for the posting are not as
That's only
big
the
as those
hearing.
bigger.
That's only the hearing. I'm talking about way before, like, once it's the
Well,
application.
demolitions are our
Considered
problem.
complete.
That's not within, or that's not, so those regulations are not in the zoning code, so that's not part of this ordinance, but we can certainly talk to our colleagues in the department and see, based on our regular practice, how can we better,
Maybe there's something that other cities do.
Yeah, we
that
can look
at.
into changing, perhaps increasing the size of the sign that would be
Who's
posted.
responsible for that?
That would be helpful.
Who's responsible for actually physically posting?
No, for making the sign larger. 4 foot by 6 foot is a good size.
We can, it's by department, like policy, so we can talk to the,
I mean, maybe it's something the neighborhood councils could initiate.
Yeah.
As something
yeah,
they
if you
do.
have suggestions for what the ideal size
Yeah.
would be.
And when.
And, yeah.
Yeah, because
you can send
typically they post it on the
Yes.
building they're gonna tear down, which is 20 feet away from the sidewalk, which has a big fence in front of it. And all they have to do is post it, take a picture of it, take it down.
Which
And
they
then
do.
then they say, well, MS came along and took it down.
Okay, let's take a couple more questions and then we're gonna wrap up and go on to Tom. Okay, I'm gonna go here and then I'll go.
You mentioned that the 21 days was trying to get a single day to cover everything, some time period. And Tom mentioned that maybe for a fence it's only 7 days, but I'm wondering on the other side of it, not the fence, where what's the longest notification period do you have?
Today.
So 21 is the longest?
24 is the longest today. So
Okay,
we
so-
went from 10 to 24, and then we landed on 21 as the sort of happy happy compromise between those two numbers.
And 4 days would seem to me not 3 days is not that important for the ones that used to get the longer time period.
What about putting some of the responsibility on the applicants? Like, let's say I want to raise my fence 3 feet and I apply. It's my job to put some sort of flag or notification that I've applied to change my fence.
If there's a posting requirement for notice of the hearing, then yes, the applicant is supposed to post. But there's no,
Notifying them that they put an application.
there's nothing currently that says they have to
I think that would
post
be a great
that they,
idea,
okay,
you know?
so you
If
want.
people aren't getting their mailing, then like I drive by and like, oh, that guy's gonna do this to his property. It may or may not affect me, I may or may not care, but he's saying people aren't getting the fences or it's not going far enough. Like her person at the end of the river is getting all the noise, but she's not within art. But if she saw a flag when they put in an application to do something, she might go, hey, that might affect me, let me see what this is about.
That people don't
Because people need to take their own
understand.
responsibility.
No, they don't
They
understand.
get the notice
Yeah, the notice.
and they ignore it. Or they go to their neighbor and their neighbor says, don't worry about it. It's all gonna be fine, you haven't got a problem. And then shit happens, excuse my French. And then they come to the homeowner association or the neighborhood council and they're crying. And they say, what's going on here? And we say, you missed your chance. We didn't know, we didn't get
And
notice,
neighbors
you
have time
did.
to look at it and they're like, I'm not gonna like this. It's worked for them.
Okay, August,
Okay.
now we're gonna wrap up.
Two things, one notification and one modification of the time. There should, on notification, well, the variable is how soon the hearing comes after
The application is
applic-
filed?
There needs to be a minimum period of time from when the neighborhood council gets it to when the hearing can take place. Just because the other 21 days is, that's just notice that when we're going to have the hearing, but it takes more than 21 days for neighborhood council to process. So,
Yeah, for the planning department.
and I agree that the application filing should be posted on the site with a picture of the project. And then here, this project will be noticed when the hearing comes.
And this is where you can contact and put on a mailing list to receive future notifications.
Yeah. Then on modification of entitlement, the 20%, I understand if it's square footage but if it's changing the design 20%, they change the elevation, how do you measure 20% of a condition of approval? They add 20% more approvals, they take away 20% more approvals. So there needs to be something besides 20% for stuff that isn't quantified.
Why are you giving 20%?
That's consistent with what's permitted for an adjustment
Coding
today.
conditions are codes and conditions, this is what people are suing and filing appeals about. So when we say that there's a community plan, the community plan says this is what the zoning is, and this is what's permitted in the zone, there is no 20%. There is no alternative compliance, there is no modification of entitlements. This is what you can make. And the small things like the windows stuff, those are small things. What I use the term, what we used to call a variance, it was something just so small. It was not, the changing of this project or the makeup of the project.
My other question related is that when this occurs, is this before construction? In other words, the project's entitled, it's flipped, the new owner wants to change the design, or is this after C of O and, the building's been there 3 years and now they want to change the entitlement to move things around or whatever? What is it, both, one or the other?
Currently, there's no restriction on when it can be filed for. So it could be both. If you have suggestions for which would be preferable, there's you can't apply for this more than X amount of years after the initial one, or you can only apply for it after.
And whether they need to go back to the community.
Yeah, so we don't have any restrictions on that now. If you have suggestions on.
Yeah, because other neighborhood councils have had projects approved and what got built did not match what was approved.
So in cases like that, or if they were specifically denied something and then come back 2 years later and say, I want this 20% adjustment, and it was something specifically proposed and denied, can they get that?
No, they should. If they were denied, they can only ask for a modification if it's been approved.
No, the project was approved, but something they wanted was denied. And they decide, well, I didn't get it last time, but I still want it, and they go back. Is there a way to take that out of the consideration?
Barbara, we should, next time we come, we'll bring somebody who's more proficient in project planning. Bonnie and I are in the policy. We understand generally this stuff. We're just trying to reorganize it. We understand enough, but you guys are really know the process is probably better than we do. So you're really going right to the things. Remember, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just reorganizing 99% of this stuff is, 99% of this stuff is already in the book.
Well, I guess.
Alternative compliance is our big, new, shiny idea.
Yeah.
If nobody likes it, we can yank it in 5 seconds.
I think what we know is that there are loopholes and that there are certain people, not everybody, who look for the opportunities for the loopholes. And we want to close them now because we're tired.
Okay. We don't, okay, I think when you want to close whatever those loopholes are, at least you'll know where to look. We can't close every loophole right now. I don't know what they all are, but at least we'll have a section in our code and you'll be able to point exactly to whatever the thing is and go right to the workflow and say, this is the problem, because right now, I don't think even Barbara Broidy could do that. Although, you probably could.
Just to go back to your, after giving it some thought, so with the modification of entitlement, it still has to be substantially compliant with the original modification, or with the original action. So if the original approval, said no to a certain aspect of the project, and then the modification allowed that wouldn't be in compliance with the original approval. Now, that's not to say that sometimes, people are very skilled at getting, finding better, exploiting loopholes. But so the way that the modification is set up is you have to go back to the same decision maker and do the same noticing. So whoever, submitted comments on the original action would be notified again of, this request for modification and would have the opportunity to say, no, you asked for that originally and it was denied. You should not be, granted that in a modification action either. So.
Okay.
Can I just
So-
comment on that one last point? So, example you gave earlier about Starbucks wanting to change to 5 a.m. versus 7. I mean, that could be, on some people's mind, very minor and on vacation. People who live near that Starbucks, it's a major, huge change. And so requiring the residents to go back and oppose, they want to come back and get 5 a.m. when they only got 7 and they made these arguments before and come back again. It's a huge burden. So I don't know how that's resolved. I don't in theory object to this, but I think those are the types of things that have to be worked out.
Okay. All right, we done? Do you have a quick question on her presentation?
A quick question that we've been trying to get an answer for 3 months from planning, including the director of planning, and no response. A few months ago, the city made the decision in their wisdom to put all the little trash haulers out of business in favor of 15 monopolies. And part of that was the apartments get a dumpster and they get a bunch of blue containers. And our...
Is this going to be relevant to the planning department?
I don't
where
know
you're going? I don't know where you're going with this, but
well,
it doesn't sound planning.
It's a simple yes, no answer. And what happened with all our serial scofflaws, they put all of these in the front yard. And we've been trying to get for 3 months, is this legal, yes or no? Do you know?
You mean where they put their recycling?
You mean they're
bins?
covering up, they're paving over their front yard, or they're just temporarily putting their garbage there?
In most cases, they pave a section for the
Put a pad
dumpsters.
for the dumpster.
And we just have 15 feet of front yard. It's
Is it less
supposed
than
to be
50, isn't it a
landscaped.
50% maximum that they can pave over for their front yard?
Yeah, well,
But they
there's-
can pave 50%.
No, you can't pay 50%.
They
No, you
can't?
can pay 50% for an access driveway. Read the code.
Right, well, how much is that though? That could be up to 50%.
For an access driveway, that's like a driveway to the rear behind the building line, or it's a circular driveway.
And walkways?
It doesn't apply to gratuitous paving.
No, I'm not saying that there's an allowance to pave for the storage of garbage, but there is an allowance to do a certain amount of paving, was my point.
Yes.
And they're using it
Well, it's not,
inappropriately.
that's not the way the code says. The code says shall not be paved, except. Yeah, and the exception is the access driveway, whether it's a straight shot or a circular.
And these people are doing more than that? They're putting their garbage on their access driveway, or they're putting it somewhere else?
The only place the 50% applies is for the access driveway.
I get that.
It does not apply to pads for garbage. And so we now, in a nice neighborhood that's for 40 years tried to have a nice neighborhood, we have overflowing dumpsters in the front yard. And we're just trying to get an answer.
We'll bring out the trash, the public works.
Yeah.
311.
And because I have issues with that too, but thank you, Bonnie, very good. So remember the public hearings on June 26th, participate, submit your comments on the markup.
Or you can email them or
email them to
submit them,
Bonnie.
whatever is convenient for you.
So I hope that you got the handouts up here. Who came in after I did introductions? I think that's all this group over here. If you want to introduce yourself in your community really quickly, and I'm going to ask Tom to answer some generic questions if he has time. Go ahead. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yes, you want to introduce yourself?
Annabella from Boyle Heights.
Great, thank you.
Keith McCobb, the West Community Council, Planning and Chair.
Great.
Hi, Grace Yu, 9 Neighborhoods,
Great, okay. Anybody else that came in after that didn't get introduced? Okay. So I know there's a lot of things going on in the planning department. There's recode, there's cannabis, there's all kinds of things. I don't know if anybody, if Tom has a few minutes to give us some general updates that he wants to give us. And then we may have some quick questions for him. Did you notice I said quick? And then I'd like to ask you guys, this could be for a future meeting, but Tom mentioned something about bringing in, just a couple minutes ago, a different group, or a different staff, I think. So I'm just going to talk about my 3 little examples, and then maybe it'll trigger some other examples that you guys have, and you can bring yours next time, and we can maybe have it be something. We'll see. This is an example of, we have a specific plan up in our area, Foothill Boulevard Corridor specific plan. It's the entire the Boulevard of Foothill. This is in the specific plan. This did not go through a project permit compliance. It never had an application. The neighborhood council was not informed. What they did was they took a building and they tore down all but one wall. And they have now built a 2-story building on this corner. This is apartments immediately adjacent. There's no buffer whatsoever. My question is, we didn't get involved in the design, we didn't get involved in the public works improvements that are going to happen here, and now the project is sitting, it's not even finished, it's not complete. And now it's become, instead of 1 address, 2. Okay, now we go to this one, number 2. This is it's also in the specific plan, but it's in a target area and a major activity area. It's an old Safeway grocery store from years ago. A hydroponics business came in and did some improvements to the property and actually caused it to where it just recently collapsed, and now it's being demolished. I alerted the planning department, alerted everybody, but nothing ever happened, but it collapsed. Okay. Okay, now we go over here, and this is over at another C2 zone adjacent to residential. These are condos across the street. This is a auto-related use. Now, I don't believe it's in a major activity or target area, but it did have an application. The fencing here, there's requirements within codes and uses and so forth that these people that have a residence here are entitled to have something better to look at than just an ugly fence. That was never taken care of, even to this day. This is an auto body shop. I go to other communities such as Burbank and Pasadena, whatever, Burbank especially, and you've got body shops and yoga studios and sound studios, and everything seems to look pretty good blended in. But I don't know what happened here. So my question is, what are the steps involved? Why didn't this happen? I don't know if this interests anybody, but I threw my 3 examples out there. I could probably come up with others, and you may have some. Yeah. So if you think you're interested in something like this, Maybe you'd like to draw your little pictures and we can ask the planning department to bring in some folks about how we get, because as neighborhood councils, we're working to improve the community over time, right? Isn't that's improve the quality of life, make it pedestrian friendly, all these different things. How do we get there? We have all these millions of dollars, now that's my new term, millions of dollars of tools and design guidelines and all kinds of things and ordinances. How do we get there? I'm not trying to stir up a hornet's nest, but I just want to try to nicely get there.
Maybe one thing planning could do would be to have like a Dear Ann Landers or Dear Abby thing, where honestly, where people in neighborhood councils who are dealing with something they don't quite get could ask for help or support and know that maybe it's the liaison person that we ask and they know who to go to if we can't figure it out in our council district, office, planners, or whatever. I mean, our planner has left for the third time. We're on I think we'll be on our fourth planner in the last 2 hours.
Each of these, just so you know, had a planner assigned.
That's a general idea, something Dylan and I are trying to do now with these new monthly e-newsletters, is we get a ton of questions on a day-to-day basis, weekly basis, and what we try to do is kind of distill it down to what was the big topic this month, and through the monthly e-newsletter, we're answering a question of the month. So if there's a big topic we want to grapple and educate ourselves together around, we want to get that feedback to start sort of doing that. So what we've done so far in the 3 updates that we've done, the first one, we put up an article about how to read case files. A lot of people still don't know how decision makers are attached to those case files. The other one was about ZMAS as a resource. And this next one, we're thinking about doing something around,
Have you find out what projects are being built near you?
how projects are built near you and where to find information, how to subscribe. So it's very like how-to guys, but if we want to dive deeper, that's certainly feedback we want to hear for folks that already know all these other tools and steps. And we want to make sure that this e-newsletter is a useful tool for you so that we can sort of learn together and grow together.
How do we find that center?
The e-newsletter, so it currently lives on our website. There's a new tab called Community Resources on the left-hand side of our website. You click there, you get our annual reports, our quarterly newsletters, and now our monthly e-newsletters. Within the monthly e-newsletters is where you'll find Dylan and I's community corner piece. And we're also starting up a new blog where we're tackling some of these issues as well. So we're trying to mix up the ways that we provide information and communicate what you want to hear about.
And can you also keep a tally of the kinds of things that are coming to you, not only for you to answer, but since we've been structuring a training for neighborhood council and that will help us to focus the training and work with you on doing better
Sure,
training.
that's a great idea. Dylan and I try to keep track of the types of questions and topics we're receiving, and that's sort of the way we're structuring our community corners. We're kind of responding to those questions in a broader sense. But a bigger topic above that is is this something that has been discussed around the Congress situation? Is this like a big workshop situation that we want to talk about for September?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, there's 4 workshops available dedicated to planning, so, yeah.
There's a big difference in expertise levels and people.
We just need a snappy title, so we get 800 people in the room.
A sexy title.
Everything you
There you
ever
go.
wanted to know.
Well, there you go. Well, I don't know about that. Okay, over here, and then I want to ask Tom about cannabis if we can, if he's game. Okay.
So it's nice to meet you guys back there as the kind of the liaisons and that kind of communication. And it sounds like the discussion we had today was a lot about process and interface, planning department and the neighborhood council, right? One thing that I would throw out quickly is it would be great if we could get electronic filing, right? When a case is decided, the documents are posted on the planning information website. It would be great if we could get filing documents. I know that applicants provide digital copies of the applications. If there was a posting of the application rather than just as well as the decision package, right, the final decision package, it would facilitate distribution. One of the first things I do is I scan the documents so I can send them out to the And there, or I can ask the applicant for the digital files, but if it became a policy kind of process of collecting that information, digitizing it, it would greatly simplify it.
And we've talked with Lisa Weber about that when she's been with us in the past.
Okay, so
And she
yeah.
said that they are working on that for the future, but I don't think that they're there yet, where all the application documents will be electronic.
Get posted right away.
Because that, I too scan them immediately and we make them public.
Mm-hmm.
So that everybody, I mean, that goes back to when August was saying, you know, we get it early.
Yes.
Like, right now, we have an application that was filed last August. It's almost up, going to be a year, and we don't have a hearing yet. So this gives all this time for you to meet with the applicant, go back and forth, try to flush things out, get as many neighbors in to talk about the project. It really is, we've done it in our efforts on early notification. We've come a long way with that partnership with the planning department in that, and we want to keep that going. But now, digitally, things are getting easier. I mean, we're processing payments, you know, with a phone now. So
And we're absolutely working on that, and right now, as of today, on our website, if you have a case file number and you type it up in our website,
Sure.
there's a little search box. Ideally, it should lead to the case file page on our PDIS system.
Yes.
And that's where most projects have everything uploaded at that point.
I think that some of the things that we could use that would be helpful, that we tend to ask the applicants for, is, have you met with DOT? There's like a single page letter that comes from Mr. Valdez. And we don't know the thoroughness at which is not the planning department, it's a different department. To what they looked at for this particular proposal. And it's like, well, we have all these questions, you know, yeah, you say it's possible, but it's just a letter that says, oh yeah, your project would probably be okay, no, blah, 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 blah. And it's just, oh my gosh, what about the turning? What about the two driveways? What about, we think there should be a signal here. What happens when the circulation on site? None of that is in that letter, but the applicant, because they're pitching their project, is saying, we did all of that. We've got all that. We've been there. And then we get to the hearing, and now we hear the real stuff going on, what really happened as far as DOT and what they have to say. I don't know how we can get,
Real-time notification.
I don't know how we can get, you know, there's a lot of things that get, you know, into the file that aren't public unless you actually go down there and go look at them. And then I don't even know if everything, and naturally so, because things are being worked on. But anyway, if there's any new things added after the application process, is there a way to get some of those updates and studies and reports and the MND and things like that?
Or if a case goes on hold for a while, right, and then they're waiting for that new information to come in, the planning department's waiting, right? It's on hold, it'd be nice to get a notification, okay, it's off hold now, and this information.
Well,
is
I do think that that's there in ZEMIS, but I think you're probably asking that they notify you. Oh my gosh, that's information overload. Maybe if we just know that it's there, we can go look it up.
Yeah.
I would be okay with that.
But you don't want to have to be checking every week the same case.
Right.
Okay. Well, okay, well, we should talk about it. See, we should talk about it. Okay. Anyway, what's next? Barbara?
On policy issues, going to the planning department website. For example, last night when I was doing my little report for my neighborhood council that I shared with you guys, on an example, transit-oriented communities noticing, I found by going into the actual council file that it was approved by the council on May 25th. But as you summarize all those policies, it has a hearing notice, oftentimes a link to the ordinance text. It should have where it is and where the decision is pending at the time. It should say in Plum, hearing to be scheduled, or heard at Plum, May 3rd, going to council. Because it's impossible to figure out where it is, and oftentimes things just get parked for years, and we don't know where they are.
I agree. Our website right now is very difficult to navigate. Dylan and myself try to stay updated. We're working on that end. That's one piece of it. It's where to find the organization. The other piece of it is this specific council file that you're talking about. That's actually not, it has not been passed. It's actually actually, it was submitted for us to develop a report about it, to provide options for, so.
Yeah, that's why
not
it's
that-
confusing. It's confusing.
Exactly, so until we are working on it, then it'll pop up in our ordinances.
Right.
So,
Barbara, those are the council file indexes you're looking at, right?
I pull
The
up the
city-
council, right, the
That's
council
not,
file, the
that's,
city
that's
clerk's.
not the planning department.
Right, but I don't wanna go there. I wanna go to the planning department website, and I wanna see,
You wanna see
you've
what
got a
we're
list
working
of
on.
15
But we don't know what's
ordinances.
coming, I mean, how do we know there's motions coming at us
I know,
left and right?
but
We don't
have
even
to-
get them, we get them when you get them sometimes.
You gotta know where it's parked. Somebody's gotta be
Well, that's a city
responsible.
clerk issue or a city.
so,
Right, but
It's
it's
got,
like
but
zooming
it's,
up the.
you've posted it and it's like, it's,
so,
When we
so
start
it's,
working on it, it pops up.
so,
everybody's got
all,
it together.
for me, it's almost a year later since the cannabis stuff got
Yeah.
approved and so forth. I'll be honest to say, I don't know if there's legal shops in my community or not. I think there's more illegal ones, but I don't know. And I don't want to go nosing around and looking for them and maybe get something happen to me.
There's a number you can call, and they will tell you if they're legal or not.
Oh, you know, I wanted to know if there's any updates on anything. There's, Mike had some comments, I heard him speak a few days ago about the money situation and the proceeds coming back that was to come into the communities and neighborhood councils, and that it's now going to be under the, how should I say, auspices of the council person. So I don't remember that being what we intended, but if there's anything updated, or maybe it's not, maybe we're not there yet, maybe there's still more work that needs to be done, because I don't want to get into another hornet's nest.
There's cannabis advertising too, which is a separate ordinance.
Yes.
It's pending.
So are there any,
It was adopted last week.
any updates, Tom, to share on cannabis, or anything else if you'd like?
Well, for the cannabis, that ordinance was already approved last
Yeah.
year, so the Department of Cannabis Regulation, which is already up and running, a little short-staffed, is issuing certificates to allow licensed operators to open up according to our regulations, our zoning regulations. Last time I heard, there was about 123 legal, certified, non-medical businesses opened up. But I don't know anything more than that about that. We also had an ordinance that regulated signs specific to cannabis. We called it cannabis advertising because we were allowed to regulate content. That was adopted last week by the city council, just to make sure that it wasn't attracting children. So they can't do they can't have Joe Camel and bright and flashy lights or anything like that. It's got to be, basically has to say there's just the name of the business. That was adopted. And if you've got questions about actual businesses, the Department of Cannabis Regulation is hiring people, and they've got a good website that you can file a complaint with. I've inspected a few with staff. If you want to look at one, there's one in downtown, MedMen, and there's a couple others. They are very well operated, I thought, so I don't know where they all are yet, but we could find that out if you're interested.
No,
But we don't regulate it. Remember, according to the planning department and according to building and safety, they're just retail. As long as they're buffered from the sensitive uses we picked out, we don't look at them any differently than we look at a bookstore.
They are legal businesses, just like a bookstore.
Yeah.
MedMen, I think last week they just issued, they went up public on the Canadian Stock Exchange, and I think it's a $1 billion outfit, MedMen. They have chains all across the country, and they're like a franchise deal. They'll come in, if you want to start a cannabis place, they'll come in and they'll say, okay, this is the way you account for everything, this is the way you adhere to all the licenses, stuff, et cetera. So that's a big business. When this started about last September, when Gary and I got involved in it, one of the things that they had in their plans was the enforcement agency was going to be 65 policemen. And there was a little other wording in there. So we wrote in and we said 65 policemen cannot possibly enforce and keep track of everything 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from the harbor all the way out to Porter Ranch. So they eliminated the enforcement, okay? There's no enforcement for cannabis, okay? And at Wednesday's meeting in City Hall, in the last 3 meetings, and we go to council to Herb's committee all the time, and we get up and I say enforcement, and then Herb says enforcement, and we still don't have any enforcement. However, we found out last Wednesday that Kat Packer, who's in charge of the DCR, which is the Department of Cannabis Regulations, there's something in her authority that says she's in charge of enforcement. So now they're talking about monies for enforcement. They haven't figured out where it's going to come from yet. And she said, well, that money comes to me because it's in my authority. And I mean, it was very polite and everything, but there were some undercurrents of that. And Krikorian said, but I'm in charge of the budget, and you guys don't know anything about enforcement. You know, that's a police thing or whatever. Yeah. And that wasn't resolved, okay? How that was, but Krikorian, in charge of the budget, was pretty forceful as far as that doesn't belong in your authority. So they're going to work on that.
What about the operating hours?
The operating hours, I think, are 8 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Guys?
Okay, the sign ordinance, which was last week, is, you know, that they have to have the name, the address, the phone number, very little stuff on a sign. But there was an ordinance passed through city planning about 2 months ago, and there was a big discussion about this. The vote was 4-3. There was a set size for that sign. Mm-hmm. And one of the fellows, and I can't recall his name,
This is the same, okay, this is the same ordinance, that just,
yes,
that was it just went to council.
okay, but that ordinance, that guy at city planning said
Commissioner
that
Perlman?
Perlman wanted a more liberal ruling.
he said there's a Walgreens in my neighborhood that has a sign that's half a block long, so we shouldn't limit the size of the sign.
Exactly.
And that's what passed by a vote of 4-3 at the city planning.
So that billboard we have in our neighborhood is okay now?
No, that's a billboard. That's different. That's advertising. That's not the sign.
He's just talking about actually at the store that we have proposed,
On-site.
because we were allowed to regulate the content of signs for cannabis. We had said they have to be at a certain size. It couldn't be bigger than a certain size. When it got to the city planning commission, they said that that was kind of arbitrary and we shouldn't be
Limiting the
choosing one over the other.
Perlman said some of his clients were mini malls and they should have the right to advertise
That's
like
exactly-
everyone else.
That's right. Okay, so
Chris has,
So,
Well, I
this
mean-
whole issue, operating hours, other operating conditions, signage, location restriction, all of that, our council, mainly me, looked into because we were concerned. Ironically, because we're probably not gonna have any in my particular neighborhood, but we had Kat Packer come. She was very impressive. She reassured at least me and others. There may still be issues of enforcement, but I would encourage everybody to go to that website of the Department of Cannabis Regulation. They, at one point, I don't know if it's still there, they had all the ordinances, they had all these various component parts, and you can go and look for yourself, all these things. That was on the website when I last looked at it a few months ago. And I would encourage you to call up and speak to her. She's very,
she is.
oh yeah, we've had her up. It was very, very good. Okay, so I want to shift gears because I want to make sure, because we're getting tight on time, that if Tom has
can
some
we talk
other.
about a trust fund? Okay,
Okay.
we asked for a trust fund for neighborhood councils, and that's what we discussed last Wednesday. But this, I think, is going to be a new taxable thing, and it was a percentage of what they were going to tax the different cannabis pieces was going to go to the neighborhood councils based on the number of, it was going to be split 15 ways, a percentage of it, I think it was 1% of that tax, was going to go to the neighborhood council, to depending on how many cannabis license places you had in your neighborhood. And it could be used for community improvements in the park and community improvements, parks, library, and maybe one or two other things. But they had to be within, the proposal when we went down Wednesday morning was a half a mile of the cannabis business. When we got there asking for 4 miles, they had already made an amendment to make it 1 mile. Well, we have 4 legal cannabis places now in our neighborhood, 7 illegal. And there is only one of those that's within 1 mile of a park. Our other parks are a bigger distance from that. Our library is a bigger distance from that. And if the money is not used up within 4 years, the neighborhood council can apply every April 1st to their council member. If the money is not used in 4 years, the council member can spend that money anywhere in their council district, in another neighborhood, which is what keeps happening in Sun Valley. And that's it. And that money's gonna sit in accounts for 4 years because we can't use it in most of the areas because we're not within a mile of that business. Our neighborhood's 5 miles across.
Okay.
All right.
So Tom, getting off cannabis, is there anything else we should know about? Sorry, I brought it up, it's all
You
my
did.
fault. Is there anything else pending that you want to give us updates on?
Do you
From
know,
the planning
if what's happening in Plum Tuesday on the temporary wall signs, if they've removed the provision about prohibiting signs on operating businesses?
I don't believe they've removed it because they haven't asked us to do it officially. They've talked about it.
Yeah.
So we'll see on Tuesday, but it is going. That's an ordinance to regulate a program that allows billboards on businesses that are undergoing construction.
On properties that are
On
undergoing
properties
construction.
that have a
Not-
wall.
They're not meant to have operating businesses, and that's one of the items I put on my little neighborhood council report. So.
The city planning department and commission recommended that the businesses have to be closed
Right,
and have to have a wall required by building and safety for safety reasons in order to take advantage of this program that allows signs, billboards, or off-site signs to go up. So you see them.
Yeah.
But
This is a-
Plum is considering the fact that there are some businesses that can remain, that are open and should remain open while they have the billboards up. So that's something that's being debated.
For those of you, if you're not picturing them, they're the gray plywood walls with advertisements on them that are now everywhere. And we have seen them where they enclose properties that aren't under construction for months and years oftentimes. And they renew the permit and they're renting the lots out for parking or storage. We have a firewood yard now on Olympic that has the walls around them. And so you should contact Building and Safety if you see this happening, but even more important, go back home and send a letter to clerk.plum@lacity.org today or tomorrow before the Tuesday hearing, and tell them that you do not want these temporary signs around operating businesses. We've had restaurants that have parking lots and they file a permit to restripe the lot, and then for a year, they have all the signs around their parking lot, they're in business and the lot's being used.
Right, but regardless of whether the business is open or not open, that wall will now, if approved, have to be required. What they really were doing illegally was putting up a wall. They were just doing a minor repair, walling off the whole property because they were lucrative.
There are problems with the ordinance that have not been addressed, and for
Like what?
example.
Well, I don't want to get.
They are.
Send us a. Okay.
They're enclosing lots, some of them, on all four sides, and they can be perhaps accessed, and from a public safety point of view, they should have view windows, because people
But are they being
can't-
required by building and safety, these walls?
They're being permitted, whether they were required or not, they're there. And so that is a huge issue. There are also the language on what they have to remove.
But that could apply to any wall, whether they're using this
Yeah, the
program or not.
construction- When they have construction walls on active sites, they have view windows every so
And where is that
often.
written?
I don't know.
Okay, well,
I don't know. The other issue has to do with graffiti removal, because one of the reasons they were allowed was to keep the neighborhood nuisance-free. It should specify that they remove graffiti from the sidewalks and utility boxes as well as from.
Okay, I believe a representative from the Office of Community Beautification who
Yeah.
does that program will be at the Plum hearing on Tuesday to answer that.
So you can all write, put forward to them,
So,
because there's nothing,
anything else
there's
that you
two
can-
letters in the file.
I'm trying to think. No, nothing that I can think of that's imminent. But I thought that was a helpful conversation about the processes and procedures. So I'm glad that everybody's paying attention. Please look at it. Call us if you don't understand it, because I know it looks complicated, but those rules are already in the book and you don't know about them. So that's really the scary thing, is that they're there and there's a lot more. We're just combining things, really. We have 6 different adjustment processes in the book, hidden all over the place, that have slightly different rules. Now we're going to have one. We have 4 different conditional use permits. We wanted to get it down to 2. We're ending up with 3, but we have 4 different processes for a conditional use permit. So not just 1, but 4. So now we're gonna end up with 3, which is a little bit better, I guess.
So I want to thank Dylan for sending me the links. They're on the Plan Check and See website, and so the 300 pages you should go through.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions?
Can you go over streamlined alcohol permitting?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
And Fabiola has some updates also, so.
And CEQA.
Okay.
CEQA
Okay.
appeals.
The SKIA ordinance?
CEQA appeals.
Okay, yeah.
I think that's a little bit more complicated.
Okay, August asked about this report we issued based upon a motion we received last year about trying to figure out a way to streamline alcohol permits. So we came out with a report, we released it about 2 months ago, and the intent is that some venues can go to the counter and get a permit for alcohol without going through a public review process, a notification, or anything other than an over-the-counter permit. And that's really what it is. And so we went to the Jobs Committee with it, we went to Plum. They generally liked our direction, so they've asked us to write an ordinance, so we will be coming up with an ordinance in the next couple of months, and we're calling it alcohol streamlining permits.
Question?
About this?
Yeah, in the old days, there used to be a notion of overconcentration of alcohol serving facilities. What happened to that?
It doesn't matter anymore.
I know that, I've seen that.
Well, yeah, but that was something that ABC regulated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
So what
The
are
state's in the
the,
business to issue those
Is there
licenses.
such a thing?
what are the sketch criteria that would allow this streamlined process?
I don't have it with me, but there's about 31 standards that we're going to sort of embed into the ordinance.
Right, like
Just
ours.
general, what's that?
Like ours.
Yeah, like, so generally, the point is to allow a restaurant to open up quicker that serves wine. It's not to allow clubs or liquor stores, it's all, I mean, we've loaded it up so that it's kind of not objectionable, I think. It's just an idea that we've been asked to do, so hours of operation, no off-site sales, no music, it's gotta be closed by 10 or 11.
They have to have a full kitchen.
Yeah, it's gotta have a kitchen, so it's basically for a restaurant that wants to open up and give you your glass of red wine. It's really, what we've done is we've looked through all of our old conditional use permits for alcohol and seen what the most effective conditions were. So if that's something that has helped, we've put it into the ordinance, so you can open up by right as long as you sign a covenant saying you are going to comply with these pre-approved conditions as opposed to the public hearing.
Tom, so we in our neighborhood, we fought to keep liquor stores out. So like in a community like South Central, how will that, will they be?
The liquor store wouldn't be allowed because they'd have off-site sales, so nothing that allows you to go and buy a 6-pack would allow you to take advantage of this program.
Okay.
It's really very narrowly defined, so read it. There's 31 standards. If you think there should be more, I think it's pretty well covered, but I don't know.
Tom, when is it coming out, or is it out?
The report is out, and the report is on our website,
It's
and
heard in Plum on the 22nd.
yeah.
But you're writing the ordinance still.
We're gonna write the ordinance, but the ordinance is gonna be pretty much like the report, because nobody had much to say other than, yeah, okay.
Vika asked about relaxation for off sales because they wanted to encourage microbreweries. Is that gonna change?
No, we're still gonna have a conditional use permit for alcohol, and that will continue. So the clubs and the off-site sales, we'll still have to have a public hearing and a notification, all of those things.
They wanted microbreweries to be included in an expedited process.
Well, if the microbrewery didn't allow off-site sales, had a full kitchen, closed at 11, there's no reason why it couldn't take advantage of it, but it's gotta make sure it complies. What's that?
They couldn't do off-site sales.
Or mail order?
No, not the way it's currently, no, we would never change that because that would open up a whole thing. There would be no reason.
So Fabiola had some updates also for us, right?
Breweries are included in this as well, right?
Well, again, it's a brewery could take advantage of it, but if the brewery, it's got to only, make the beer that's being served in the brewery, and if they also have a full kitchen, and if they also close at 11, and if they also have all these other things, then it could. If they sell off-site, then no. If they are open till midnight, no.
This handout mentions the draft applies only to one on-site alcohol sales, and there is lobbying to extend this, to extend the streamlining to offset site
Well, that's what Barbara
sales.
just said, yeah.
Yeah, so it looks like it's still being discussed.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's gonna be lobbying because people would like it to be a lot more liberal.
So is there gonna be any regulation to this?
We have
Well, it's already, we're gonna, when we, the report that's out, it's on our website, go look at it. We don't have any reason to change it yet. We have not been directed to change it, so we're happy with the way it is. I doubt we're gonna, I know it's not gonna get any support to allow off-site sales, because that's not the intent. The intent is to open up, to allow an Italian restaurant to have, serve wine. That's really the goal.
Sounds good, sounds like a good idea.
All right.
And then it'll take time away from our planners who are reviewing Italian restaurants that serve wine for a whole year.
Okay, anything else for Tom, and we want to get to Fabiola?
Oh, the sequel, what do you mean sequel? The sequel appeal.
Appeal code amendment.
Okay, that's, the one thing, we had a staff hearing last week,
Yes.
and it's called, I'm not actually very well versed, but the state has come up with a new determination for CEQA. Right now, if you have when you do CEQA, are required to go through the CEQA process, you can either be required to draft an EIR or an MND, or you're exempt. They've come up with a new one called SCEA, S-C-E-A. It's just when you are, I believe, building in a transit-oriented area. It's no more liberal or conservative than any of the other ones, but it does allow some of the transit-oriented developments to go through this type of process, so they look at slightly different things. It's a procedural thing. Right now, anybody who takes advantage of that SCEA has to be authorized by our city council, regardless of what the action was. So I don't want to get into the details, but if you're doing a permit for something very small and you're using this type of determination, and the decision maker, who might be the zoning administrator or the director or the city planning commission, is reviewing it, the authority for the CEQA or this new SCEA had to go to city council regardless. We're just saying in this ordinance that whoever makes the decision can decide on the CEQA also.
The other part of it is.
That's all I'm saying. It's not really saying anything, but.
According to what I read, it says that the department may charge up to $500 for a CEQA appeal.
Correct.
That's a problem.
It is a big.
Well, we're not going to. That is just existing language in state law, correct?
Well, we don't have to put that in, do we?
No, we don't have to. We are not proposing to change the fee. There is
Well,
no proposal to change the fee. If we did propose to change the fee, it would be a different ordinance. The fee is, I don't know what the fee is now for an appeal, like $125?
Right.
But
Because,
what's that gonna do?
leave it out?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like you're raising the possibility that it can be $500
Right.
to appeal, and we all go, well, that
Where are
knocks
we gonna get
out
the money?
millions of communities from being able to.
Yeah, but we're not gonna do it. We're just quoting state law, just to remind you, that's the cap. We can't go to $1 million, we can only go to $500. We're keeping it at 125, but state says we go up to 500. I guess we could take it out. I don't really know why we reiterated that,
It's
just
too
to let
much
people
money,
know.
that's why.
Well, we're not gonna collect it. We're not going to charge you
We don't
that.
trust the city.
What's
The
that?
city, when the city goes broke in the next budget crisis, they'll
Okay,
go
well,
back and start.
we could do it anyway.
Right.
So we can do it anyway.
But this shows somehow to us an intent.
That's a good argument. I like that.
Well, I think.
I like, that makes sense, although I think it also shows that you can't say the city's gonna charge you $1,000, because that's impossible. We'll never be able to charge you $1,000 unless the state changes that law.
But we know that, so we're
Tom?
safe.
Okay, all right.
Tom,
That's a good I think that's a good comment.
Tom, you might reword it so that the onus is on the state, saying the state allows up to $500. That doesn't imply that the city is going to
I think, I don't recall our actual language, but yeah, we can change it any way we want, but we can't change, we can go down, we can't go up.
We immediately thought you were going up.
Yeah.
That's what is our reaction.
Rates never go
Okay.
down.
I don't think so. If we go up, we'll have to have a fee ordinance. And we'll have to do a fee study about why we would need to go up to $500.
We didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, no, that's just state language. We're keeping it at whatever it is now, one. 25 of the code.
So all of you write to the file, you have the file number on the
Well,
report.
the name of the planner, whoever's working on it.
Yes.
Esther
Azine
On.
Hancock.
Oh, Azine, yeah, Azine, yeah.
Azine, write to Azine,
Right.
tell him no $500.
But it's not 5, it's only,
No, up
It's
to
not go-
500. Please remove
The
state
language.
language.
Yeah, there's no necessity for it.
Okay. Who's,
Did you
ready
have
for
another question,
Fabiola?
Cindy? Oh, so Fabiola?
No, I need a direct line to you constantly. I think we all do. Okay, thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, I just have a quick.
Thanks,
update.
Tom.
I brought you guys copies of our new newsletter. Sorry, there's only one left if anybody didn't get a chance, but try to bring a big stack. The only update I want to provide is just the ongoing stuff with our community plan update program. A lot of you who are in any active community plan update areas are going to be hearing soon from our department, and we're going to start talking to you about our outreach. So for anybody in the harbor area, anybody in the valley area or on the west side, you're going to start hearing from us. And a lot of that means that your individual neighborhood councils are going to hear from us. And then I think somebody last month brought up the point about what kind of information are we going to release in order to standardize or to set expectations about the kind of feedback we're looking for? How are we going to educate people first about what community plans are? That's certainly something that got taken back, and that's certainly going to be part of the outreach strategy that we want to help make sure people understand first what a community plan is and what the changes, what that encompasses, so that we have a good outreach program for that. So thank you for those comments last month. Other than that, ongoing efforts for community plans. Dylan, who represents right now the central area, has a Hollywood plan update.
Right,
And I'll take
so-
questions after this.
Sure. So just a few updates on some of the outreach we're doing. We have been going to some of the neighborhood councils in the Hollywood area. And then this past Thursday, we were at the East Hollywood Farmers Market to do a little pop-up table and talk to people there about the proposed plan. And then additionally, as was kind of mentioned earlier, the Hollywood Community Plan team is going to be doing an online webinar on Thursday, this coming Thursday. I believe it's the 14th at 6 p.m. So you can go to the project website, which is hcpu2.org. And you can kind of register for the webinar there if you're interested in the community plan update process generally or in the Hollywood community plan specifically as well.
HC.
Can you say that again?
hcpu2.org.
So that means Hollywood Community Plan Update 2?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, so any questions for us?
Yes, where is the west side in the queue, and specifically Brentwood Pacific Palisades?
And
Okay.
West LA.
So you're gonna start here in the queue, the west side?
Yes.
And what is the Brentwood?
Do we have a start date for the west side?
So all of these are gonna be rolling out throughout late summer, early fall. So
Okay.
that's when you're gonna start hearing from us. That's when you're gonna get letters, or you're gonna be contacted by our planners, you're gonna learn who your planners are for that area.
But
So
are
it's
all the plans for the west side going to be proceeding on the same schedule
No.
with all the planners?
So the west region is going to be divided. First, we're gonna tackle the southern half. The southern half is Westchester, Palms, Venice, West LA.
Westchester.
No Mar Vista?
Venice.
Sorry, Westchester, Playa del Rey, Palms, Mar Vista, Venice, and West LA. So the southern portion. And then in about 3 years, then we're gonna roll out Brentwood, Pacific Palisades, Bel Air, Beverly Crest, and the Westwood Community Plan.
So Bel Air, Beverly Crest, and Brentwood Pacific Palisades would be 2022,
21. So by 2024 is the goal for all of the west side.
It would be nice, West LA relates more to Westwood.
Yes, exactly.
Than we do Palms,
To Palms,
Playa del Rey, Vista. That's like, we don't belong there.
If you want to.
You're right, you don't belong there.
If you want to take a detailed look at the schedule, This is actually Council File 16-0422, and in it you'll find a schedule for the entire city, plus a map that outlines.
Say that again?
16-0422. And in it, you have the entire schedule, the narrative for which portions of each area are gonna be updated at a time, along with a map that gives you a visual guide of the schedule.
Because of the way transit works in our area and UCLA, I don't know how we go about changing that, but it really would make sense to do it at the same time as West LA.
So depending on which community plan you're talking about,
West LA.
once you get to know your planner for the area, you can dive into those conversations with them. Yeah.
Are we going to, for the 2021 group, are we going to receive a planner now? Or are we gonna have to wait until then so that we can begin to plan
Okay, take care.
for 3 years?
So if you're on the second half of the schedule, so those teams are not assembled yet, so you wouldn't know who that planner would be until we assemble those teams, which won't be until we update the first batch.
Okay, and when will that be?
Within 3 years from now.
So we have to, so we're not gonna really have an opportunity to discuss until it's time to develop a plan.
Well, it'll
Wouldn't it be a good
begin
idea
like
to
all
have
plans.
you provide it on the paper?
You can start looking at it, like all plans. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't look at it before that, but when we launch in 2021 for your plan, it'll mean we start the process, which means we'll start with the outreach and the state.
So it will take a longer amount of time to actually, to get it completed then? It'll start in 2021, is that?
If you're
I'm
talking
trying
about,
to-
if you're talking about the west side specifically,
The northern
2024
side of
is,
the west side.
2024 is all of them. So by that point, they should all be done. Ideally, half that time is spent on one region, half that time on the second region. But what I'm saying is both will have the same process where we're not gonna jump into the second batch having already done work. Just like we're not jumping into this batch having already done work, we're just starting the process.
Okay, great.
The same council file that you all referred to, also in that report, it lays out the 3-year timeline for updating the plans, including when we start kind of looking at the outreach strategies, start doing background research, start engaging people all the way up to the
When
end.
it starts, in other words.
So next month I will bring you more updates, but in the meantime, you may or may not be starting to hear from your planners. But I will give you updates next month as
Who's
well.
actually responsible for assigning the specific planners to the areas? Who does that?
Department management.
Our management.
Okay, which manager,
Who's in charge?
who's the person who's actually at Vince? Is
After last night's conversation.
Yes, our director, Vince.
No, this is ambitious.
Okay.
So Fabio, do you have anything else?
Thank you.
So before, Barbara's gonna give us some updates, but I wanna make sure everybody puts their chairs and tables back neatly. And any of the food refreshments over here, if you'd like to take some home, please feel free.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Next, Barbara.
Here's just an icebreaker. How many daily trips across the Sepulveda Pass every day? What's your guess?
250.
250?
7
million.
7 million.
500,000.
Closer?
Million.
412,000. I'm mentioning this because if you didn't hear on the news, Metro has started the planning process for the 405 Transit Corridor project. If this is of interest to you, they have a website up, they have a survey they're taking. They've actually tracked with GPS tracking from your cell phones where trips originate and go to and from across the Sepulveda Pass, which is kind of interesting. There's the whole slideshow that they presented to us Thursday night and is being presented right now in Sherman Oaks to the Valley. So this is the flyer if you want to come up and look at it. But it is a multi-year process and they're thinking of expediting the entire construction process because of the Olympics. So we will see. It probably is. It was on the news this morning and last night. So that's one little side thing. I ran into David Ambrose, who is the president of the City Planning Commission, when I attended an interesting program at UCLA Thursday of last week. And the title was, "Is There Such a Thing as Too Much Democracy? Challenges to Building Affordable Housing in Los Angeles." Very interesting program, someone from Trammell Crow, a former city planning commissioner. And I must say that Zev Yaroslavsky, the former councilman and supervisor in LA, was the voice of reason and reasonableness, because he said to these folks assembled, many of whom in the audience were developers, that he never had a big problem with communities, and he didn't see a need to revamp CEQA if developers and policymakers would be honest with and open with communities in what they're proposing.
Yes.
But he never had a problem with working with the community and going through a
We tried to
reasonable
get him to run for
process.
mayor last time.
Yeah.
He didn't
Yes.
want
I want to add to that. We've done our job too well, people. We've educated our stakeholders. We've done our job way too well. They're becoming smarter, know better questions to ask. And the people in the development industry don't like this. They are trying to do end ones around us by blaming us, blaming our democracy and our transparency and our input that makes good governance possible. They're blaming us. So when she presents to you on events like this, pay attention, because this is where Sacramento is getting their information about us.
They blame single-family properties in Los Angeles and elsewhere in the state for the housing crisis, the affordability crisis, and homelessness. And Zev said many years ago that there was ample multifamily zoned land to provide all of the housing needed that Mayor Garcetti wanted to build when he came into office. So there are some real big tensions, and it's not reasonable to blame us. The city doesn't build housing. Developers build housing, and they build it where they can make the most money.
So what do we do about this?
Well, it's a...
What do we do?
Yes.
What do we do?
Action
Okay, what are the actions?
Community
Number
land
one, we
trust.
have to monitor Sacramento legislation as well as our own. It's a tough job. It
And that's
doubles the
why you
burden.
have state legislation on the
It doubles
back
the
of
burden.
this.
That's one thing. Second thing is to get to your state legislators and tell them that you want your democracy. You want your participatory democracy in planning your community, because the anti-democracy YIMBY contingent that is pressuring Sacramento for these laws has no answer for that. They have no answer for
They
it.
believe in Reaganomics of housing, which is permit developers to build as much as they want,
Right.
wherever they want, because if we increase the supply of housing, that will automatically lower the cost of housing. And that has not been proven true in New York,
They build for
major
the
cities
people they
around
Well,
the
that's,
world.
that's,
No, but
that's
it-
one aspect of the other thing of their beliefs.
Trust me,
It's an real estate development is no less than coal mining or drilling for oil and extractive industry. We need to find other ways of maintaining that value in our community. Community land trusts are ways of doing things that are
And ways
popular in
to
other countries.
finance
But yes,
and-
to address the real needs, but
And
with,
the issue about providing, Zev said very clearly, we don't have a housing crisis, we have an affordable
Yeah.
housing
Yeah.
crisis. So that's the issue. How do these projects get financed? And it turns out that the recent tax incentives at the federal level have made it harder to build affordable housing, to get the finance credits to do that.
People want to give back, but everybody's
So, there is a website at UCLA. They have a Ziman Center for Real Estate, which is funded very much by developers, but they do have papers, many of them slanted on affordable housing, on financing. You may find it interesting.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
did videotape this, and I'm hoping that the proceedings of this will be online. There is something, Senator Stephen Bradford, Housing Summit and Resource Fair, providing access. If you want to see, this is how to keep communities affordable and equitable, challenges and resources of affordable housing development, policy and legislative solutions. I don't know who he is, but there's some good speakers. This is Saturday, June 23rd at El Camino College. I'll put this on the table if you want to write down the information, from 9 to 2. June 23rd, what?
You know, I'd like to know who they are, they're working
The
for,
person-
because then it tells.
I don't, he is a state senator. The keynote is Senator Jim Beal, who is the author
Jim
of a
Beal
$4
is
billion.
excellent. Completely knowledgeable, and he's the one who stopped Scott Wiener.
Who?
He stopped Scott Wiener?
Yes, he
Then we
did.
should go and support him.
Yeah,
He's the chair.
Who?
He's the
Correct.
chair. Beal.
Beal,
Beal?
Senator Jim Beal, he's the
Oh,
chair of
yeah,
the
he's the
Housing
one who
Committee.
said that he didn't want to enshrine trickle-down economics into the.
He's
into the
also the
code.
man who grew up in a working class family. His parents bought a house in front of a bus stop. They only had one car, and then they moved the bus stop. So he understands what Scott Wiener was
Okay.
actually proposing.
Okay, this is another program held May 18th, Too Much and Not Enough Housing Costs and Scarcity. This will be on the UCLA Lewis Center website. Next. Oh, some of you have heard about the Boring Company and the tunnel, the famous tunnel. Elon Musk has proposed digging a tunnel from West LA near Pico and Sepulveda to Culver City, ending at Sepulveda and Washington. The city of Culver City is not hot on this idea. They do not support it. And the city of Los Angeles was considering it as a sewer project would be in public works. And they approved a haul route for it, and the community knew nothing about it.
Well, they gave a mitigated negative declaration under false,
Yes.
claiming it had no environmental impact.
Right, and that it isn't a transportation project, it's a test tunnel of 2.7 miles. It is a clear violation of CEQA because they're piecemealing a project that if you go to the Boring Company website, you can see it going from point A to point B well in excess of 2.7 miles. So they did schmooze us and have some of the neighborhood council people to their tunnel in Hawthorne, which looks like a tunnel. But there are two lawsuits that have been filed against it as a CEQA project.
Yes.
So Elon Musk had a program at the Stephen S. Wise Temple one evening. Half the audience or more were people from his company and his fan club, and reservations were limited, and we all have to watch. There were major questions about how that might impact the Sepulveda Pass project that Metro's doing. Metro, interestingly enough, said Thursday night that they were looking perhaps at public-private partnerships in order to expedite the construction of the project through the Sepulveda Pass. So some of us went, ooh, is this a Musk-Metro marriage coming forth? So who knows? It'll be interesting. And what's really funny, I thought it was a joke, the Boring Company financed the initial work on this test tunnel and the company by selling flamethrowers. You can go to the Boring Company website. They were having a pickup party on June 9th.
Where?
Today. Well, you had to pre-order. You're out of luck.
I
They're sold out.
need one of those.
I wanted to.
And a very wise,
Flamethrowers for kids.
a very wise state legislator tried to.
Were they going to offer them as bonus with Teslas?
No. Who knows? We thought the tunnels would only be for Tesla cars. So, okay, going to the state legislation, you were familiar perhaps with SB 827 that was defeated, and Sharon worked a lot on that.
She worked a lot on that.
Thank you.
The companion to that was SB 828.
It's bad.
And it's very bad. Now it's, I think I have a typo here, they are asking to have them meet 125% of population estimates.
But they took the critical assessment that would establish that number out of it, so it's somewhat defanged, somewhat.
It should be opposed. So if you have the time to contact, which committee is hearing it next?
Shoot, it's supposed to be in the going to the main floor, going to assembly, isn't it? Didn't it pass out?
So, Cindy, can we send, where's Cindy?
She left.
She left. Okay, so we'll send to her where it's going and where letters can be sent. SB 831, this is a problem. As you know, the state has trumped LA City's rules on accessory dwelling units, granny units. Now they can go up to 1,200 square feet instead of the old.
Invisible floor area.
But what this ordinance is trying to do at a statewide level is say that the FAR of an accessory dwelling unit should not be counted as part of the FAR of that lot, which is problematic, because if you're under, for example, a BMO that says you can only have 45% of
The intent is to
FAR.
knock out our neighborhood conservation zones. The whole intent of this is to destroy single-family zones as a state policy, basically. They just aren't saying so.
Just as a corollary to that, our neighborhood has been bombarded by a company that is offering to build your garage into an accessory unit at no cost to you, but you will allow them to rent the garage, and they will return to you a 20% on it, and this goes for 25 years.
That's a really bad deal.
Isn't
That's
that
a seriously bad deal.
operating a business at some?
Yes.
To me, it sounds like scattered site apartments in a single-family zone, but I don't think anybody
Do you
sees it
have
the same
any-
way.
Can you scan that in and,
Yeah.
okay, and
Yeah.
send it so we can see what
We
it
should
is?
That's like the
see,
solar
but we should
industry
also
model.
see if it can be challenged.
And if it's a viable company that's doing it,
Right.
who's
And
doing it?
if people are
There's
endangering
the
their
website,
properties.
I looked at their website and there was not a lot on it.
That's,
There wasn't.
Not a lot on it.
Okay, AB 686, another winner.
Ma'am? Can you
Eight
give me
what?
the nomenclature on that?
686.
Is that just recording everything?
It's a Zoom.
This one was introduced as a fair housing measure that
They make
promotes
a variety
anti-discrimination in
digital
housing.
recorders.
However, and this is kind of complicated, it opens up cities to be sued by the state.
Where did you buy that?
And
My neighbor,
for almost
Peter, called.
any reason
Mike,
imaginable.
give me your card,
The
Mike, I'll get it
language
to you.
allows the state, which department is it? The Department of Fair
I got it.
Employing and Housing, the right to sue any city if a complaint was filed that they had raised any barriers to housing, education, employment, or anything, which means that they could force upzoning, for example,
right, I read about
near a
this.
good
Yes.
school.
Yes.
Because if they didn't upzone all the land around that school, the city would be barring people from accessing good education.
Well, this is really a terrible bill because in Los Angeles, you do have the magnet school system.
Yes.
And if you,
Charter
even if
schools
you
also.
live near that school, your kid might not get in. There's a point system involved, so you'd wind up with upzoning on the theory that there's a good school, but in practical reality, the people or families who move there wouldn't be able to get into the school in any case. So this makes no sense.
It's
just
a bad
stupid.
bill. And the problem is, everyone wants fair housing, and nobody wants discrimination, but this broadens it to the language is zoning restrictions, development limitations, and other actions, inactions, policies, regulations, programs, practices, decisions, or investments that restrict access to high-quality education, transportation, jobs, healthcare, recreation, features of a healthy environment, including clean water and air, safe neighborhoods, social services, cultural institutions, and other opportunities based on protected characteristics.
Who authored that? Skinner?
No, he's a co-author.
She.
Santiago?
Santiago? He's LA.
No, not Santiago. I don't
Authored
know.
it, or?
I don't remember.
Or is it co-author?
Well, we'll try and find out.
We know, but what the strategy would be is to ask your council member to introduce a motion that the city oppose this at the state level. That's true for all of these. And then if you personally, or you want to share with people in your councils or your homeowner associations, that people should write letters opposing, because at the state level, they count the letters and they summarize it and say there were 300 letters received in opposition
Because
or in
this is
support.
kind of turning into the Barbara and Sharon show, but in terms of strategy on that, if we could get the motion introduced, like the room motion against 827, what you'll need to do is do exactly what you did with 827. Get out to all your neighborhood associations, get out ahead of your opponents, get people supporting a no on that legislation, because we basically ran roughshod over our YIMBY friends on the west side. They were so shell-shocked they couldn't keep up with us. And, it was a good thing. It was a very good thing.
Okay.
So get out there fast, don't
Okay.
wait. Call special meetings, do whatever you need to do, but get out there fast.
The last state ordinance is a watch thing, SB 961, because it's something, again, that focuses on land within a half a mile of major transit stops. And it's basically looking to create a financing mechanism for development within those zones, but it also tries to give back some funding to those communities. So look at it. It needs to have amendments from what I've read.
Which one is this
and
again?
this is Ben Allen's bill, SB
Oh,
961.
yeah, well, the thing to remember with bills that deal with equivalents of redevelopment agencies is that California is an eminent domain state. Okay? So you need to be really, really, really careful with this stuff.
Because they can start claiming land.
Yes, they can.
In those
They can,
areas.
and they will.
On the city stuff, we talked about CEQA appeals and getting the city to drop the up to $500, because if it's the state, it's in the state, and we already have a nice level. The temporary wall construction signs, please write for Tuesday's hearing to Plum, saying no businesses may operate behind these signs. Citywide sign ordinance, if you haven't heard me talk about the citywide sign ordinance, take this piece of paper, write to Plum. Mr. Huyazar is so adamant on letting digital signs be all over the city,
It's
which
because
is
he's getting,
horrible.
money for
And
it.
the mayor has millions of dollars in the city budget from digital sign revenue. We don't know how he's quite come up with that, but there's a wonderful version of the sign ordinance, version B+, that the City Planning Commission passed. And ever since they passed it, I'm telling you, back in 2015, Plum has been whittling away at this ordinance, and it's disgusting. It's disgusting. We talked about the alcohol sales, we talked about the transit-oriented community noticing, and what I wanted to mention about David Ambrose, the president of the City Planning Commission, when I spoke to him, he indicated an interest in hearing creative ideas from the community and said, you know, City Planning Commission is a policy body, and if you have good ideas, you should bring them to us. So instead of responding to all of the things that get thrown out at us, we should probably be thinking about things we'd like to see the city do.
Why don't we
and
get him
be
in here? We had him to
proactive.
plan check once before. Why don't we get him back in
We
here?
could invite him and his co-chair.
Absolutely. Let's invite them and get them in
He
here
also
and
said something
tell 'em what we
interesting to me when I suggested that they fund pilot programs in communities before they start the community planning process. And I said, what we really need is a planner or a consultant to work with us on a pilot idea, something that we all agree on is crappy in our community. Let us get together, teach us the tools, so that when you come to us to do the community plan, we have a bunch of people who are ready and knowledgeable and understand how it works. And he said, well, I could support that, but the planning department hasn't got any money. The neighborhood council should put up half, whatever it costs. You guys should put up half. And he says, and I don't want to see all gray hairs.
Really?
Oh.
That's age discrimination. That isn't very nice.
David Ambrose.
He did.
Well,
Yes.
we all get dye jobs and then
They-
nobody care.
But they made us gray.
Yeah.
Or hide it under a hat.
So he said,
We'll do
you
that.
know, you'd have to be willing to
We should
work
all get
and meet
red
at
wings.
different times because young professionals can't meet at 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night. They're still in the office. And when I was on the Hollywood Neighborhood Council, we met on the weekends, and here we are on the weekends, right? So anyway, I just wanted to share
Thank you for all.
the point of view.
I'm going to put hair dye on our budget.
There's a good idea.
Or hair pieces.
Does anyone need the sign ordinance flyer?
Purple.
Okay.
How about purple?
I like
Is
it.
he has
Barbara,
purple
is there
hair?
anything
That
new
could be our
on the
color.
street
Exactly.
furniture contract?
Oh, thank you for mentioning that. I wrote to Lance Oishi. He is the person who's in charge of it in the city public works area. But as far as we know, it's still at the city attorney. So write to your council member
What does it mean? I'm sorry, I don't
The
understand.
street
what
furniture contract is bus shelters, public toilets, the three-sided public amenity kiosks that are all over the city. And there is a 20-year contract right now with DeCo. And it's 3 years from expiring. And instead of opening up a contract
A bidding,
process,
right.
the city council has instructed the city attorney to negotiate privately with DeCo on a renewal. We don't know how long a renewal would be, and it doesn't take into account community input, feedback, and opportunity for competition. None of those things.
Are they required to do that by?
I don't
by their
know,
statute?
but a
I
lot
don't
of
think
us.
So anytime you've got a dollar amount threshold
But
that's
I'm
met.
asking, that's.
Their
I'm pretty sure
rationale,
that-
the rationale that's been presented is that they're 3 years out and they've stopped putting in new equipment because it's not worth it to them to do that. And the city wants to get more equipment because they get a share of revenue from the advertising. Therefore, they want to sign, seal, and deliver the deal. So we
Someone's not a
need to
negotiator in
challenge
that
that.
situation.
And I don't know why I didn't put it on the flyer.
Transparent.
And what is the fellow's name who's in charge?
Lance Oishi, and he said, I sent him a whole page of questions on it, and he said there is a full report that they've done in the file. So I have to find out what the file number is and send it out to you guys.
Oh, that'd be great.
I'll
Well,
ask Cindy
Barbara,
to
you've
send it
done
out.
it again.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your.
Thank you.